Chapter 4092. Hence, Hua Jin had no choice but to call for a moving company. Within a few hours, all the belongings in the apartment had been moved into the villa. That night, they moved into the villa. Hua Jin felt like he was in a dream. No one would have thought that he would move into the villa that he bought on the same day. This was too fast. Too fast. Too fast. At night, the salesperson came to prepare the final procedures for the handover of the villa. She had wanted to see if the owner of the villa had noticed any problems with the quality. In the end, she realized that the owner had already moved in. Was this a hotel? Did he move in with his luggage? The salesperson was experienced and knowledgeable, but she was still shocked. She had never seen such a generous buyer. Although there were many rich big bosses in Beijing, no matter how generous they were, buying a house would require a few days of planning. It was not a one-time deal. In the end, this customer was good. A few 100 million yuan was easily spent. The house was handed over before noon, and when she came to take a look at it at night, the furniture and appliances were all ready. Did he have to be so scary? Moreover, the owner was so young and so handsome. Hence, the salesperson tried to find out from Yo-Yo who Gong Jie was to him. In the end, Yo-Yo said casually, "Gong Jie is my uncle. Auntie, he already has a girlfriend." Just as she was wondering who this handsome and rich man's girlfriend was, she watched as Hua Jin walked out in a bathrobe. She was even more dumbfounded. Originally, when she was at the sales office, she was a little curious. She had suspected the identity of Gong Jie and Hua Jin. Because Gong Jie had bought the house with his credit card, the house was registered under Hua Jin's name. She knew who Hua Jin was. He was a big celebrity. Many big celebrities came here to buy houses. It was not the first time she had seen a big celebrity buying a house. There were even many big bosses who bought villas for their mistresses. It wasn't like there weren't any. However, the relationship between this Gong Jie and Hua Jin made her a little confused. In the end, as soon as she entered, she saw Hua Jin in a bathrobe. For a moment, he could not help but let his imagination run wild. Could it be that between the two of them, was it that kind of relationship? This man's partner was Hua Jin, who was rumored to be gay. Could it be that they were also kept as mistresses? The salesperson felt that he was in a bad mood. Why were all handsome men in pairs? Finally, after completing the procedures to hand over the room, the salesperson left with a gloomy face, clutching his heart. Gong Jie walked over with Natalia in his arms. Seeing Hua Jin in a bathrobe, he cleared his throat and said sternly, "Please don't show your chest in front of Natalia." Hua Jin was dumbstruck. He reacted and immediately retorted, "What do you mean by exposing my breasts? I'm well covered. Your chest is exposed." Gong Jie looked righteous. Unsightly. Hua Jin was speechless. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth, but he told himself not to stoop to the level of such people. Hence, he went back to his room with an ashen face. It was not until he changed into his pajamas that Gong Jie looked better. Yo-Yo covered her mouth and snickered at the side. Hua Jin felt very aggrieved. Did he lose his basic personal freedom just to take care of a child for him? Chapter 4093. Yo-Yo looked at Hua Jin and then at Gong Jie and muttered to herself. What a pair of clowns. Especially when she saw Hua Jin's steely expression, Yo-Yo's heart ached for him for a few seconds. At night, Natalia was still pestering Gong Jie to sleep with her. Initially, Gong Jie wanted Hua Jin to coax Natalia to sleep. However, Natalia was a little picky about the bed and the person. She only recognized Gong Jie and not Hua Jin. Hua Jin had no choice but to find Gong Jie's room awkwardly. He braced himself and knocked on the door. Gong Jie happened to be awake. When he opened the door and saw him, he was a little surprised. "What's wrong?" "Natalia misses you." Hua Jin sighed and said helplessly, "This child doesn't really recognize me. She only recognizes you. Moreover, without you, she can't sleep peacefully." Gong Jie was stunned for a long time. He said helplessly, "If you can't handle her, what will happen to you and her after I leave? I'll have to take one step at a time. There's nothing I can do." Gong Jie couldn't help but laugh. He walked to Hua Jin's room. The wall lamp was on. When Natalia heard Gong Jie's footsteps, She immediately sat up on the bed. When she saw him, she smiled. "Daddy." She opened her arms to Gong Jie. Gong Jie walked slowly to the bedside and sat down on his side. However, he didn't respond to her hug immediately. Natalia was very surprised. She tilted her head and looked at him in confusion. She didn't understand why he didn't respond. Gong Jie asked in a low voice, "Why aren't you sleeping?" This was the first time Natalia saw Gong Jie so serious. For a moment, she felt inexplicably guilty. Actually, she did sleep well. However, the bed was too unfamiliar. Moreover, she was not used to Hua Jin. After all, it was the first time they met. She tossed and turned on the bed, unable to fall asleep. Natalia stammered, I can't sleep. Recognizable bed?" "Yes." Natalia nodded fervently. "I really tried to sleep, but the bed was too soft. I couldn't fall asleep." The mattress under her was the best zero-pressure mattress on the market bought by the Gong Jie. It was not soft, but at least it was more comfortable than the hard iron beds in the hospital. Natalia had been sleeping on a metal bed all this time, so she couldn't get used to the soft and comfortable mattress all of a sudden. "Close your eyes and don't let your imagination run wild. You'll fall asleep soon, okay?" Gong Jie comforted her gently. Nibbling on her lower lip, Natalia nodded with a frown on her face. However, when she lay down and her brother was about to tuck her in, he suddenly heard a choked sob coming from the woman. He was shocked and immediately leaned over. The sobbing sound became clearer. Hua Jin heard it too and reminded him softly, "Is she crying?" Gong Jie frowned. "This girl couldn't be that weak, right?" Hua Jin frowned and said with a headache, "It's her first time in such a foreign country. Maybe she hasn't gotten over the jet lag yet. Moreover, she's in a foreign bed with a foreign person. She'll naturally feel unfamiliar and scared. Why don't you keep her company tonight? I'll sleep in your room." With that, Hua Jin tried to find an excuse to escape. Gong Jie shouted in a low voice, "You're not allowed to leave." Hua Jin's footsteps were forcefully stopped. Chapter 4094. Hua Jin stopped in his tracks. "Sit over here," Gong Jie ordered again. Hua Jin had no choice but to move back to the bed stiffly like a robot. "Lie down." Hua Jin lay down with a straight back. "Hug her." Just as Hua Jin was about to retort, he vaguely felt a sharp gaze sweeping over him in the dim light. Frightened, he immediately opened his arms and pulled Natalia into his embrace. A certain great demon king was finally satisfied. He whispered into Natalia's ear, "Daddy will sing for you, okay?" "Hey!" Natalia smiled in surprise. "Okay." When Hua Jin heard that Gong Jie wanted to sing, he was shocked. Oh my god. If Gong Jie wanted to sing, wouldn't that be wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves? He vaguely remembered that Yo-Yo didn't seem to have any talent in singing. If that was the case, Gong Jie's uncle probably didn't have good musical genes either. Just as he was making wild guesses, Gong Jie opened his thin lips slightly and sang in a deep, magnetic voice outside the window, "The raindrops, dong dong ding ding, falling into my heart, freezing into ice, memories of the past, two people in a room, roses and champagne. When you leave, I can only embrace the cold air." When Gong Jie's deep voice came out of his thin lips, Hua Jin was stunned when he heard it. Perhaps he didn't have high expectations for Gong Jie. He had always thought that Gong Jie would be tone-deaf like Yo-Yo. However, he had forgotten that Yo-Yo's tone-deafness must have been inherited from Mu Yaja. He recalled that Gong Jie's mother was Mu Qingcheng. Mu Qingcheng's voice had once shocked the entire capital. With such a singing mother, Yun Shusha's singing was also very good. And how could Gong Jie's voice be bad? Good. His voice was even louder than Ji Yuxing's. In the world of singers, Ji Yuxing's voice was the only one that the general public recognized. His singing was soulful, magnetic, and had a penetrating power. This penetrating power did not refer to his voice, but it had a power that could penetrate one's heart. It's easy to infect everyone. To be fair, Ji Yuxing's singing skills were definitely not the best. However, his voice was the most contagious of all. Gong Jie was better than him. So much so that Hua Jin even had the urge to cry when he heard this song. Memories of you. Too many to count softly, Softly lonely sings to me I'll never forget. Evidence of your presence. How else am I going to prove it? Waiting for the dawn together even if I lose you I'm gonna love you too. Even if the whole world is dying I gave myself an ending. Gong Jie rarely sang. He did not like to listen to music and rarely sang. In the past, when Yun Shusha pestered him to sing, he was too shy to say it. However, when it came to Natalia, he was able to throw away all his burdens naturally. After singing 2 songs, Gong Jie heard Hua Jin's steady breathing and knew that he had fallen asleep. Natalia's eyelids gradually became heavy and she was about to fall asleep. Just as he stood up and was about to leave, a soft little hand grabbed onto him. Gong Jie turned around and saw Natalia holding his hand. Her voice was hoarse as she said, "Don't go." Her soft voice carried a hint of reluctance. "Stay with me, otherwise I won't be able to sleep, okay?" Chapter 4095. He sat down and caressed her forehead gently. "Good girl. You should sleep now. I want you to keep me company." Natalia's coquettish tone was irresistible to him. Feeling helpless, he lay down next to her and adjusted the quilt for her. Then, he gently rubbed the tip of his nose against her forehead. "Sleep. Good night." Natalia's lips curled into a smile. Her eyelids gradually closed, and she soon fell asleep. Before nightfall, Yo-Yo was sent back to the Mu family. When he told Yun Shusha that Gong Jie had adopted a daughter, Yun Shusha was so shocked that her eyes almost popped out of their socket. How was that possible? Her brother was known for being a cold-hearted person. How could he adopt a daughter out of kindness? She couldn't wait to meet the girl who made her brother break his rules. She wanted to see what kind of girl she was. Yo-Yo had the keys to the villa. There were a total of 3 keys. 1 for Hua Jin, 1 for Gong Jie, and 1 for him. However, the next day, when Yun Shusha opened the door of the villa and appeared at the bedroom door with Yo-Yo, she saw the 3 of them hugging each other as they slept. She didn't feel good at all. When Yu saw his mother standing rooted to the ground in a daze, he, too, poked his head in curiously. However, when he saw Gong Jie hugging Natalia while the latter hugged Hua Jin to sleep, he was so shocked that he sucked in a breath of cold air. Ahem. Yo-Yo cleared his throat solemnly. Gong Jie was a light sleeper. When he heard the commotion, he opened his eyes abruptly and looked in the direction of the sound. He saw Yun Shusha and Yo-Yo standing at the door. He was slightly shocked and immediately sat up on the bed. He ran his fingers through his messy hair and followed Yun Shusha's gaze to the side. Hua Jin, oh, he remembered now. Last night, the 3 of them seemed to have slept together. However, wasn't it normal for men to sleep together? Why was his sister looking at him with such a meaningful gaze? Gong Jie's lips twitched. Could she have misunderstood something? However, Yun Shusha didn't say it out loud. If she didn't say it out loud, he wouldn't even have a chance to explain himself. If he tried to force an explanation, it would only make things worse. It would only make things worse. However, the way she looked at him seemed to be saying, "I know, you don't have to explain." Gong Jie felt even more frustrated. He stretched out his long leg and immediately kicked Hua Jin awake. Hua Jin also woke up at once. He sat up abruptly. When he saw Yun Shusha, he thought that he was dreaming. He giggled a few times. When he turned his head, he saw that Gong Jie was also there. He immediately couldn't wake up anymore. Why was he sleeping in this room? Hua Jin thought about it carefully and finally remembered. He remembered. Yesterday, Gong Jie had sung for Natalia. In the end, he had fallen asleep while listening. It had been a very peaceful night. He didn't have any dreams. He didn't know what happened after that. Looking at the situation, could it be that Gong Jie had also stayed in this room last night? That must be it. Natalia must have been reluctant to let him go and pestered him to stay. When he saw the strange look in Yun Shusha's eyes, Hua Jin's eyelids twitched even more violently. He had also been reduced to the same awkward situation as Gong Jie. He also felt that Yun Shusha had obviously misunderstood something. However, since she didn't say it out loud, he couldn't explain it either. What should he do? He couldn't let her misunderstand. Chapter 4096. Why are you sleeping here? Hua Jin paused and suddenly slapped his head. Ah. He immediately pretended to be calm and said, I remember now. Yesterday, Natalia couldn't sleep and wanted to pester you. You sang for her, and then I fell asleep while listening. But why are you sleeping here too? Didn't you ask me to develop a relationship with Natalia? Gong Jie knew very well that Hua Jin was deliberately saying this to explain to Yun Shusha so that she wouldn't let her imagination run wild. Thus, he played along and said, she didn't want me to leave, so I lay down. I was sleepy too, so I didn't think too much about it. Why, do you mind? I don't mind. No wonder you slept so tightly the whole night. Hua Jin quickly said, but what was the name of the song you sang yesterday? It was so good. I'll download it and listen to it. Upon hearing this, Gong Jie asked in a low voice, did I sing? Yun Shusha's attention was immediately diverted. Shou Jie, did you sing? Her astonished look surprised Hua Jin even more. Hey! From what you're saying, he never sang before. Yun Shusha nodded. Shou Jie doesn't like to listen to music, so he doesn't like to sing either. But I think his singing should be very good. Gong Jie's face turned green from embarrassment. No way. How can that be? I just think it's very good. Hua Jin said to Yun Shusha, when I heard him sing yesterday, it was really amazing, but I've never heard that song before. Is it an old song? Gong Jie ignored him. This song was actually composed by him when he was bored. Because he didn't like to sing, but that day, when he was sitting by the beach, a melody suddenly appeared in his mind for some reason. The lyrics were also born naturally along with the melody. There was no one around, so he sang it himself. As he sang it, he remembered it deeply. To be more precise, the melody and lyrics were all randomly hummed by him. When Hua Jin heard this song, he was a little surprised at first. She was surprised by his charming voice and even more surprised that he had never heard such a beautiful song before. Logically speaking, with such a high standard of arrangement, it should be an instant hit. Why had he never heard of it before? Hua Jin didn't know that the Gong Jie was humming to himself. If he knew, he would be shocked. Natalia was woken up by the voices of a few people. Coincidentally, she had slept enough. She opened her eyes and blinked. Gong Jie realized that she was awake and gently pinched her cheek. You're awake. Like a kitten, Natalia snuggled into his arms and hugged his waist. Daddy, Gong Jie, too, reached out to hug her and gently caressed her silky hair. Such an intimate snuggle made Yo-Yo feel very uncomfortable. Why was she so clingy to Gong Jie but not willing to play with him? He didn't know what this uncle of his was capable of. Could it be that he had secretly fed Natalia some kind of bewitching potion? Gong Jie suddenly realized that Yo-Yo was staring at him with an inexplicable hatred. When Hua Jin saw this, he couldn't help but want to laugh. This uncle and niece pair was really too cute. This was the first time he had seen Yo-Yo jealous. Chapter 4097. Yun Shusha noticed it too and held back her laughter. She had never seen Yo-Yo get jealous before, so she found it very novel. It wasn't that Yo-Yo had never been jealous before, but it was only towards her. Other than her, she had never seen Yo-Yo get jealous of anyone. Yun Shusha also looked at Natalia seriously. No matter who it was, they would still be deeply attracted by her mesmerizing purple eyes at first glance. She was very surprised. In this world, people with a pair of purple pupils were extremely rare. There were many people who were born with different eyes, but pure purple eyes were extremely rare. She remembered that in the era of black and white photos, there was a European and American actress called Elizabeth Taylor who had a pair of purple eyes. That pair of eyes could be said to be a rare treasure of that era. However, there was still controversy about her purple eyes. Some people said that her eyes weren't pure purple, but that it was just an illusion under the refraction of light. But now, the beauty had passed away, and the photos that remained were all black and white. There was no way to verify it at all. However, the eyes of the girl in front of him were truly purple. She was too beautiful. Yun Shusha couldn't help but sigh inwardly. No wonder he was her son. His taste was extraordinary. Aside from her purple eyes, this girl's facial features were very delicate and cute. Yun Shusha picked up Yo-Yo and said comfortingly, "Let's wait outside, okay? Natalia wants to change her clothes." "Okay." Yo-Yo nodded like a gentleman. Yoon Shusha had just carried Yo-Yo out when Gong Jie stood up and said to Hua Jin, "Help her change. I'll wait outside." With that, Gong Jie ignored Hua Jin's pleading gaze and left the room. Hua Jin and Natalia stared at each other in bewilderment. This time, they had packed a lot of Natalia's clothes. Many of them were new clothes that Gong Jie had bought for her. Natalia could not help feeling disappointed as she watched her man leave. Hua Jin saw this and gently patted her head. He smiled and said, "I'll help you put on your clothes, okay?" "No." Natalia pouted. "I can wear it myself." "Hey, you can wear it yourself." "Okay." With that, Natalia walked to the wardrobe and picked up a dress. She seemed to like dresses. However, it was normal for girls to like dresses. Hua Jin sat quietly at the side, but he intentionally looked away. Although Natalia was still a young girl who had yet to develop, he still wanted to avoid her. From the corner of his eye, he saw her unbuttoning her nightgown. Relieved to see that she was dressed properly, he stood up and said, "I'll wait for you outside." Natalia was a little surprised and nodded blankly. Although she was young, she understood the difference between men and women. Although she was still young, Hua Jin respected her as a woman. This gentlemanly attitude warmed Natalia's heart. In fact, she had long understood the difference between men and women. She also knew that there were some things that she should avoid. However, in the hospital, Professor Romanka didn't seem to mind at all. This made her feel disgusted. However, seeing how Hua Jin adhered to his principles, Natalia felt warm in her heart. Chapter 4098. Her impression of him had also improved. When Hua Jin walked out of the room, Gong Jie had just finished changing his clothes. When he saw him walk out, he looked displeased. "Aren't you going to help her change her clothes?" Hua Jin frowned and seemed to be in a difficult position. She's a girl. Although she's still young, it's better to teach her that there's a difference between men and women from a young age. It's not appropriate for a man like me to do that, right? When Gong Jie heard this, he immediately realized this problem and looked at Hua Jin in a new light. "I didn't expect you to be so principled." Hua Jin snorted. "Of course. Do you think that everyone is as stupid as you?" When Gong Jie heard this, his expression changed. "What did you say?" "No. Nothing." He quickly turned his head and mumbled softly, obviously terrified. Yoon Shusha, who was trying to hold back her laughter, suddenly said, "Does she know how to put on her own clothes? She's so young. Why don't I go in and help her?" Hua Jin said, "She knows how to put on her own clothes. Besides, even if she doesn't know how to, let her figure it out herself. Independence is something that needs to be trained from a young age." Yoon Shusha nodded and asked again, "What's going on with this child?" Gong Jie said, "Didn't Yo-Yo mention it to you?" "He mentioned it to me." Yoon Shusha lowered her voice and asked, "She has dual personality disorder too?" "Really?" "Yeah. I can't tell." Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and laughed. "Does Yo-Yo have dual personality disorder?" "Yes." "You can't tell either, right?" After he said this, Yoon Shusha couldn't help but be enlightened. "But why did you adopt her?" Yoon Shusha paused and said, "My Shou Jie didn't like children in the past, right?" When Gong Jie heard this, he did not say anything. He only looked at Yo-Yo meaningfully. Yoon Shusha followed his gaze and looked at her son. She understood half of what he meant. Could it be that this guy had his first awakening of love so early? Yoon Shusha was a little confused. Hua Jin let out a long sigh. "He's her guardian, so I'm her surrogate guardian." Yoon Shusha was a little confused. "Hey, what do you mean?" Hua Jin didn't dare to say anything. He just looked at Gong Jie with a helpless and meaningful gaze. Yoon Shusha, on the other hand, was baffled. However, after a short while, she understood. Most likely, Gong Jie had entrusted Natalia to Hua Jin. After all, Gong Jie's job required him to fly around the world for many years. It was so dangerous, so it was definitely inconvenient for him to keep Natalia by his side all the time. Therefore, it was only natural that Natalia would be handed over to Hua Jin to raise. However, according to Yo-Yo, Gong Jie had specially bought a villa and registered it under Hua Jin's name. He also gave him a blank check as alimony. It had to be said that little Jie was very generous with his money. It seemed that he liked Natalia a lot. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put in so much effort. However, Hua Jin was a little hesitant. What if Natalia and I are not close after Gong Jie leaves? What should I do then? Yun Shusha said, you have to cultivate your relationship with her. Relationships are cultivated. How do I cultivate? In this aspect, Hua Jin was obviously at a loss. I don't have any experience in this area. It's very simple. For example, Chapter 4099. Natalia had just changed her clothes and was about to leave when she saw Gong Jie, Yun Shusha, and Hua Jin standing outside the door, along with the 4 yo-yo. All of them had charming smiles on their faces. The 4 of them asked almost simultaneously, are we going to the amusement park? Natalia was stunned for a moment. She was a little confused. What's amusement park? It's. He realized that the woman might not understand what an amusement park was in Chinese, so he explained it in English. It's called amusement park. Amusement park. Natalia immediately realized that the amusement park was the legendary place where there were balloons, amusement rides, and many cartoon characters. For a moment, her eyes were filled with longing. Okay. Her eyes were immediately filled with excitement. When Natalia smiled, she was especially charming. Her violet eyes made him feel as if there was endless tenderness in his heart that could not be contained and was about to overflow. Gong Jie could not help but walk over. Just as he was about to reach out and hug her, Yun Shusha stopped him at the right time. Don't forget that today's trip to the amusement park is to let Hua Jin and Natalia cultivate their relationship. When Gong Jie heard that, he could not help but look disappointed. They had indeed discussed it earlier. After all, Hua Jin was Natalia's real guardian. Natalia had to spend most of her time with him. However, now that Natalia liked to stick to Gong Jie and not Hua Jin, Yun Shusha and Yo-Yo thought of using the amusement park's parent-child trip to cultivate their father-daughter relationship. This was also something that had been agreed upon with Hua Jin. Hua Jin had also vowed that he wanted to use the trip to the amusement park to cultivate his relationship with Natalia. Gong Jie had also promised that he would do his best to create an opportunity for the 2 of them to live together harmoniously. He absolutely could not destroy it. Therefore, he suppressed the urge to hug Natalia and allowed Hua Jin to walk over. He squatted down in front of Natalia and said gently, Uncle will hug you, okay? Natalia glanced at Gong Jie with a hint of longing in her eyes. When Gong Jie saw this, he pretended to be indifferent. He walked in front of Yo-Yo and gently picked up Yo-Yo. Natalia was a little disappointed to see him hug Yo-Yo first. Hua Jin tried to reach out his hand again. Daddy, can you hug me? Natalia looked at him again and finally nodded in agreement. Yes. All right. She opened her arms and hugged Hua Jin's shoulders, snuggling into his embrace. Hua Jin carried Natalia in his arms, and the group decided to set off. Their destination was still Fairy Tale Valley, which was built by Laji Group. However, after 2 years of settling down and with the completion of the new phase of the project, Fairy Tale Valley had become one of the top theme parks. Other than having more rides, the theme had also been perfected. Fairy Tale Valley was developing a series of themed animated films. They wanted to use Fairy Tale Valley as the backdrop to make a series of fairy tale movies. Fairy Tale Valley's share of the profits for the new quarter was very significant. This also proved that Yo-Yo's eye for talent was second to none. Li Hanlin's methods and ambitions were obvious to everyone. His goal was to turn Fairy Tale Valley into a world-class fairy tale theme park. Chapter 4100. The villa was not too far away from the theme park. When they set off, the traffic was not very congested. Hence, they arrived at Fairy Tale Valley in less than half an hour. With Li Hanlin's meticulous arrangements, the 5 of them managed to get VIP passes. With this card, it meant that he could play all the games without having to queue up. When they entered the entrance, Natalia was deeply attracted by the themed statue placed at the entrance of Fairy Tale Valley. The themed statue of Fairy Tale Valley was a rainbow unicorn. This was designed by Yo-Yo. The unicorn had snow-white manes, black eyes, a golden horn, and a rainbow ponytail. It was so cute and charming that it had become one of the most popular cartoon characters in the world. The rainbow unicorn created by Lagi Holdings had even become the favorite toy of children all over the world. As Lagi Holdings' signature mascot, the sales of this toy accounted for a considerable portion of the company's sales. Many people might not know where this toy came from, but they had definitely seen it before. It was obvious that the design of this toy was a success. What a beautiful unicorn! Natalia ran over with a smile. It was obvious that she loved unicorns. Seeing that his mother really liked the rainbow unicorn, Yo-Yo's vanity swelled immeasurably in an instant. She likes the rainbow pony. Yoon Shusha glanced at him coldly. It was as if she saw her son's proud tail. Are you very proud? Gong Jie did not hesitate to pour cold water on him. What's so great about being able to draw? Unlike some people who only know how to make sarcastic remarks, Gong Jie was speechless. Hua Jin held Natalia's hand and walked to the front of the statue. When he saw that she liked it so much, he could not help but feel happy too. Sometimes, he really envied her. The younger the child, the easier it was to be satisfied. Often, a lollipop or a toy could be satisfied easily. When you were with your child, you would feel that happiness and happiness were actually that simple. Hua Jin's mood could not help but lighten up a little. He lowered his head and held up his phone. Do you want me to take a photo of you? Sure. Natalia pointed at the rainbow pony. I want to take a picture with the rainbow pony. All right. Hua Jin was secretly glad that he was smart enough to bring a selfie stick. He placed his phone on the selfie stick and was about to walk to Natalia's side. Natalia pushed him away in disdain. I want to take a picture with rainbow pony alone. Hua Jin, he pouted and said, can't we take a picture together? I want to take a picture with rainbow pony alone. Natalia's attitude was firm, and Hua Jin couldn't say anything more. So, he brought her to her spot and raised his phone. Smile. Yes. Natalia was very cooperative, showing her white teeth. Crack. Hua Jin gave her 10 consecutive shots. People with good looks would look good even if it was just a snap of them. As Hua Jin continued to take pictures, he became addicted. He took more than 20 pictures in a row. Natalia's posture as she hugged Rainbow Pony stiffened. Are you done? Seeing that Hua Jin was still taking pictures, Natalia thought that it was because the pictures were not good enough. Chapter 4101. When Hua Jin stood up, Gong Jie immediately snatched the phone from his hand and flipped through the photo album one by one. Swiping his finger across the photos, Natalia's bright smile seemed to make the sun even brighter. Hua Jin was pleased with himself. How's my technique? Gong Jie did not look at him but continued to admire the photos. He couldn't help but smile and finally spit out 2 words, not bad. Can you give me a higher rating? When Gong Jie heard Hua Jin's complaint, he looked at him calmly. Why? If I give you a higher rating, you'll get a bonus. Hua Jin was silent. Natalia tilted her head and looked at Hua Jin, then at Gong Jie. She asked softly, do you want to take a photo with me? Yes. Hua Jin immediately waved at her like a little fangirl. Wait for me. He snatched the phone from Gong Jie and was about to run over when Gong Jie grabbed him by the collar and pulled him back. What are you doing? Stand here. Hua Jin was speechless. Gong Jie glared at him. Stand still. Hua Jin instinctively stood up straight, but he didn't know why he wanted him to stand still. Gong Jie walked to Natalia's side and picked her up. Then he said, take the photos. Hua Jin felt humiliated. So he was treating him like a personal photographer. He had the urge to smash the phone on the ground. Did he really think he had no temper? Gong Jie, this rascal, he would show him what he was made of. Come, give me a smile. Hua Jin raised his phone and kept taking photos of Gong Jie and Natalia. Lean your head on your shoulders a little more. Yes, very good. His eagerness made him look like a bumpkin. When Yo-Yo saw this, her eyes were filled with disdain. Just a moment ago, he had seen him clenching his fists tightly as though he was about to explode. Who would have thought that he would still be so cowardly? A cowardly flower. When the Gong Jie was done, Hua Jin wanted to walk over and take a selfie with Natalia. However, Yo-Yo had already walked over and put her arm around Natalia's shoulder. She smiled and said, "Take a selfie for us too." As she spoke, she leaned her head against Natalia's head affectionately. Hua Jin said, "Do you think you're taking a wedding certificate?" Yo-Yo said, "Go ahead." Hua Jin, such an arrogant tone despite his young age. Hua Jin suppressed his indignation and took a few more selfies for Yo-Yo and Natalia. When it was finally his turn, Natalia refused to take a selfie. She was attracted by the hot air balloon in the distance. Natalia pointed at the hot air balloon and said, "Is that a hot air balloon?" Gong Jie nodded. "Yeah. I want to play." "Okay." The group of people were like stars surrounding the moon as they walked away with Natalia. Hua Jin stood alone in the wind and was stunned for a while. He felt so wronged. He came back to his senses and chased after them. He asked and found out that a hot air balloon could only seat 3 people at most. Gong Jie and Yo-Yo immediately stuck close to Natalia. It was obvious that the two of them wanted to sit with her. Yun Shusha couldn't take it anymore. She cleared her throat and said, "Don't forget why you're here." Chapter 4102. Yun Shusha glared at Yo-Yo again. Yo-Yo was silent. All right. He would give in. Yo-Yo stood aside dejectedly. Yun Shusha said to Hua Jin, "The 3 of you can sit together." Hua Jin got his wish and boarded the same hot air balloon as Natalia. However, the space in the hot air balloon was very small. With the 3 of them sitting together, the space was already very cramped. Hence, the 3 of them were very close to each other. Hua Jin felt that his face was almost pressed against Gong Jie's back. He looked up with some resentment. Was this guy so tall? Oh, he had forgotten that Gong Jie was almost 1.9 meters tall. However, was the difference of 10 centimeters that big? In the past, when he stood further away, he could not feel it. Now that he was closer, he realized that the difference was so obvious. This height difference made him feel very hurt. It was Natalia's first time in a hot air balloon. Hence, she was a little nervous. She tugged at Hua Jin's clothes tightly. As the hot air balloon slowly rose, she grabbed his collar even more anxiously. How does this hot air balloon fly? Hua Jin was stumped by the question. Children of Natalia's age were especially curious. That one question was enough to make him stumble. It was not that he did not understand, but it would be too difficult to explain. Hua Jin also understood the principle of using hot air to lift the balloon. The upper half of the balloon was a large balloon and the lower half was a hanging basket. The inside of the balloon heated the air and used it as buoyancy to lift the entire balloon. However, with such a complicated principle, if he really explained it to her, not only would she not understand, she might even ask worriedly, "Will this hot air balloon fall?" He looked at Gong Jie for help. Natalia saw that Hua Jin was looking at Gong Jie. She also looked at Gong Jie in confusion. However, she saw someone say faintly, "By magic." Hua Jin was stunned. How could Natalia believe such a perfunctory answer? Magic. Natalia's eyes lit up. Really? Yep. Oh my god. The world really has magic. It's so interesting. Hua Jin's English was average, but he could barely understand. Gong Jie coaxed her, saying that the hot air balloon could fly because of magic. It was magic that made such a big balloon fly. What surprised him the most was that Natalia actually knew. Believe. Yes. It turns out that children are so easy to coax, but is it really okay to say that? Would it create a misunderstanding for her? While Hua Jin was still hesitating, Natalia turned her head to look at him and asked expectantly, "Do you want to do it? You have magic." No, sorry. As soon as Hua Jin finished speaking, Natalia's face could not help but show a trace of disappointment. When Gong Jie saw this, he gently held Natalia's little face and winked at her gently. "Natalia, you're a magician. You know. Me. Yep." Gong Jie gently pinched the tip of her nose. "Yes, you are." But Natalia was a little hesitant and cautiously reminded him, "I don't know magic. Why not?" Gong Jie gently kissed her forehead. "When you smile, the whole world becomes beautiful. Isn't that the best magic in the world?" As soon as he finished speaking, Natalia understood what he meant. Her eyes widened in surprise, and the boy revealed a charming smile. Really? Chapter 4103. When you smile, everyone will be in a good mood. Therefore, your smile is the greatest magic. Hearing that, Natalia smiled at Gong Jie. Then, she turned around and smiled at Hua Jin. Hua Jin was stunned for a moment. Very quickly, he was infected by her bright smile and couldn't help but smile too. When Natalia saw that Hua Jin was really smiling, she was instantly inspired. It's your. It happened. When I laughed, you laughed, and he laughed too. I really know magic. Gong Jie patted her head in relief. Then, he glanced meaningfully at Hua Jin. Hua Jin immediately squatted down and said with a smile, Natalia's magic is amazing. In fact, he was marveling inwardly. Gong Jie was the one who had not shown his true colors. He didn't know that he was so good at coaxing children. So, it could be said that way. Hua Jin felt that his EQ had been crushed. But, he had to admit that if magic really existed in this world, Natalia would definitely be the best magician. Because just looking at her smile made him feel like he had been healed. In fact, coaxing a child really doesn't need to be rigid. A child's childhood needs romantic fairy tales. It might as well create a fairy tale world for her. Those ideas and rules that only adults can understand. When she grows up, she will understand. When she is young, shouldn't she enjoy an innocent childhood? The hot air balloon didn't float very far. Because the distance was limited, it floated and floated. When they reached their destination, Hua Jin carried Natalia in his arms and Gong Jie followed closely behind as they got off the hot air balloon. As Yo-Yo and Yun Shusha's hot air balloon was still a while away, Gong Jie saw a gazebo not far away and suggested that they wait there for a while. The gazebo was directly opposite the dessert station, which sold milk tea and snacks. Natalia was attracted by the donuts and milk tea. Gong Jie ordered a drink for each of them and bought some snacks. Then, they sat at the gazebo and waited. After a while, Yo-Yo and Yun Shusha came down. Gong Jie stood up and was about to greet her when he saw Yun Shusha walking over with a pale face. He could not help but feel a little nervous. What happened? Yun Shusha patted her chest, obviously still having lingering fears. Yo-Yo explained, maybe, the hot air balloon was too shaky. Mommy thought there was a malfunction and was afraid that the hot air balloon would fall. Gong Jie said. How could it fall? Accidents are hard to say. Yun Shusha was still in shock. Beside her, Yo-Yo mumbled, you don't trust your son. Hey, what do you mean? When Hua Jin heard this, he could not help but laugh. He reminded her softly, your son invested in this amusement park. Yun Shusha suddenly understood. Yo-Yo patted his chest and said, if anything happens to mommy, I'll take responsibility. Gong Jie said coldly, but if something happens to your mommy and you're with her, who can guarantee that you'll be fine? Yo-Yo was silent for a long time. Then, he said in disdain, Uncle, must you argue with me? Gong Jie said seriously, no. Mitch. Yo-Yo glanced at him and saw that Natalia was sitting on a chair and eating heartily. Coincidentally, he was also a little hungry, so he walked over and saw that she was hugging a chocolate donut. The corners of her mouth were dirty, and she looked like a greedy kitten. Chapter 4104. Is it good? Yo-Yo swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It wasn't that he hadn't eaten donuts before. He didn't like them, but for some reason, when he saw her eating so happily, his appetite was whetted. Hua Jin saw this and said helplessly, why do you keep staring at the food in her hands? Because, she's eating so happily. If you want to eat, I'll buy it for you. Without waiting for Yo-Yo to say anything, Hua Jin stood up and walked to the small window. He bought donuts and milk tea for Yo-Yo according to the taste he had bought for Natalia. Hua Jin put the donuts into Yo-Yo's mouth. Yo-Yo took a bite and sighed regretfully. Why, it tasted worse than he had imagined. It wasn't as good as he had imagined. But he saw Natalia eating so happily, especially her cherry lips. She gently took a bite of the donut and broke through the chocolate coating. The soft core was on her lips. It was so tempting. But when he tasted it, it tasted bitter. Yo-Yo knew how to make donuts himself. If he were to give a rating for his desserts, he would definitely give it a 9 out of 10. But if he were to give a rating for this dessert station, he would probably give it a 4 out of 10. But when he saw Natalia eating so happily, Yo-Yo couldn't help but ask, "Is it good?" Natalia had already finished 2 chocolate donuts and was sucking on her fingers. She looked up and saw Yo-Yo looking at her in surprise. She nodded and said, "It's delicious." "What's this called?" "Donuts." "Donuts." Natalia tried hard to absorb this new Chinese word. She enunciated clearly, "Donuts, delicious." Gong Jie had already told her that this would be her place of residence in the future. Since she was going to stay here, Chinese would replace English and become her mother tongue. Although she was born here, she lived in an orphanage for a while before she was taken to the United States. Although she didn't forget her Chinese, it had deteriorated a lot. However, Natalia was extremely talented in languages. Even though she hadn't spoken Chinese for a long time, her pronunciation was still very accurate. "Donuts, very delicious." Yo-Yo said proudly, "I know how to make donuts too." "Hey!" Natalia looked at him as if she had discovered a new continent. "Do you really know how to make donuts?" "Yes. My cooking is countless times better than this." "Really?" Natalia was stunned. "I don't believe it. If you don't believe me, I can cook it for you. You'll know after you eat it." Yo-Yo was very pleased. Beside her, Hua Jin chimed in, "Yo-Yo's desserts are indeed delicious." "It's true, it's not fake at all." When Natalia heard this, she was very surprised. She looked at Gong Jie inquisitively as if she was asking for his opinion. Gong Jie nodded silently. "That's right. It's true." "Wow," Natalia's eyes sparkled. She immediately hugged Yo-Yo's arm and said coquettishly, "I want to eat it. You can cook it for me." "Okay, no problem." Yo-Yo winked at her. "I'll make whatever flavor you like. I like strawberries and chocolate. There are other flavors too." "What other flavors are there?" "For example, mousse, vanilla, coffee." The 2 little clowns started to talk about donuts. Chapter 4105. When it came to food, Yo-Yo spoke clearly and logically, and Natalia was also a foodie. Her appetite was whetted by Yo-Yo. In a way, these 2 little fellows were really a match made in heaven. One loved to eat, and the other knew how to eat. Hua Jin walked over, not wanting to interrupt them. However, they were at the amusement park, and they couldn't just sit there and talk about what flavor of donut. "Natalia, be a good girl. When Yo-Yo comes home, I'll make donuts for you. Let's go on the Ferris wheel now, okay?" Natalia looked at Hua Jin, and then looked at Yo-Yo reluctantly. She wanted to say something, but she didn't. It was obvious that she was a little disappointed. When Yo-Yo saw this, he couldn't bear to see her like this, but he still promised, "I promise you, I'll make you delicious donut." "When will it be?" "I'm not free tomorrow." "How about the day after tomorrow?" "Okay." Natalia nodded obediently, and then she was willing to stand up. Hua Jin held Natalia's hand, and Natalia took the initiative to reach out and hold Gong Jie's hand. From afar, the backs of the 3 of them looked inexplicably harmonious and warm. This time, Hua Jin came to the amusement park fully prepared. He was in disguise, but along the way, he still attracted the attention of many tourists. "Ah, isn't that Hua Jin?" "It feels like it, but why would Hua Jin appear here?" "That makes sense. But from his silhouette and aura. Also, look at his hat. I remember when Hua Jin appeared at the airport, he was wearing that hat. How is that possible? Did you see it with your own eyes?" "Of course. At that time, I personally went to the airport to pick him up. I'm Hua Jin's loyal fan." As the number of people increased, the discussions became louder and louder. Many tourists wanted to see what was going on, so they kept squeezing towards Hua Jin and looking in his direction. At this time, many people found something even more interesting. That man who looks like Hua Jin is holding a little girl's hand. This little girl is so pretty. She looks like a mixed blood. How is he similar? He's definitely a mixed blood. Oh my god. Look, she has purple eyes. Impossible. How could there be purple eyes in this world? Could it be cosmetic contact lenses? Isn't it a little too exaggerated for this young girl to wear cosmetic contact lenses? Look at that man, he's the one the little girl is holding. God, he's so handsome. He's even more handsome than Hua Jin. The point is that it's so high. I feel like he's over 9 meters tall. You look so aggressive. TSK TSK TSK. I'm suddenly so envious of the little girl they're holding hands with. Don't tell me both of them are gay. Most good-looking men are gay. Gradually, the discussions became louder and louder. Gong Jie also heard the discussions and glanced sideways. He saw more and more people approaching their direction. Hua Jin became more and more nervous. It would be fine if there was a distance, but in close proximity, no disguise could hide the fact that he was the superstar Hua Jin. What should he do? If they were discovered, this place would definitely turn into a pot of porridge. Why not run away? This idea suddenly flashed through Hua Jin's mind. Chapter 4106. Get lost. There was an angry shout. Gong Jie's sharp gaze swept over with displeasure. The people around him were shocked by his gaze. Gong Jie had a pair of eyebrows that were as sharp as the edge of a sword. Usually, he was expressionless and appeared relatively calm. However, when he frowned, he exuded an aura of authority without being angry. He had the inexplicable aura of an emperor. Coupled with that pair of cold eyes, it was enough to freeze the crowd within a few dozen meters into ice on this sunny day. In an instant, the noisy crowd quietened down. Everyone was intimidated by Gong Jie's cold gaze. Super fierce. This man was super fierce. He looked cool and handsome, but when he lost his temper, there was a thunderous feeling. Wherever Gong Jie's gaze landed, the crowd retreated by 3 meters. Hua Jin was also stunned. It was not that he was intimidated by Gong Jie's aura, but he did not expect Gong Jie's gaze to be so powerful. It was much more powerful than 10 bodyguards. However, he finally found a resonance. If not for the restriction of his identity, he would have asked those people, right? He's really fierce, right? His eyes seemed to be able to shoot out sharp sword. Right? It was not that he was a coward. It was true. However, at this time, he was thankful that Gong Jie's gaze was too intimidating. Otherwise, he did not know how to get out of this predicament. Yo-Yo and Yun Shusha, who were behind him, benefited from this. With Gong Jie, the god of death, clearing the way in front, the road behind naturally became smoother. Yun Shusha did not have to worry about being recognized by passers-by. The 5 of them entered the Ferris wheel without any problems. It was Natalia's first time seeing the Ferris wheel. Her eyes were filled with longing and some worry. To her, the Ferris wheel and the hot air balloon were probably more exciting activities. The hot air balloon was fine. This Ferris wheel was really high. It was so high that even if she raised her head, she could not see the top. Her childhood was spent either in the welfare home or in the hospital. If it weren't for the looks of discrimination from the other children in the orphanage, or the smell of disinfectant, he wouldn't have been able to resist. Although her purple eyes were very beautiful, the other children in the orphanage all treated her as an anomaly. They all called her monster or monster. The children were still young and immature. Most of the children felt that only those with black or brown eyes were considered normal. Her purple eyes made her look like a fairy. The children were all afraid of the fairy, so they didn't want to play with her. As a result, Natalia's childhood was very lonely. It was her first time going to an amusement park, let alone a Ferris wheel. Therefore, uneasiness, excitement, nervousness, agitation, all kinds of complicated feelings mixed together. Yo-Yo could see the worry on her face and explained, "Don't worry, the Ferris wheel is very safe. So tall." Natalia craned her neck and stared for a long time. Hua Jin asked gently, "Do you want to play?" Natalia nodded. "Yeah, I want to play." "Then, let's go together." Natalia nodded contentedly. The car could seat a total of 4 people, so Yun Shusha suggested waiting for them at the rest area. She didn't really like the Ferris wheel. She had only come to the amusement park to accompany Natalia. Chapter 4107. It was Natalia's first time on the Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel made 2 rounds. When the car reached the highest point of the first round, Natalia could not help but feel nervous. Yo-Yo was also nervous. He could not help but recall the time when they were on the Ferris wheel. They had been attacked by assassins and the Ferris wheel had been stopped at a high point. He and Xiao Chen had been on the brink of death. Therefore, it had left an indelible shadow on the Ferris wheel. However, perhaps because of Gong Jie's presence, Yo-Yo felt a little more at ease. For some reason, even though he usually despised Gong Jie, it was only in words. In reality, as long as Gong Jie was around, Yo-Yo would feel a great sense of security. The name Gong Jie represented a sense of security. Therefore, when Yo-Yo wanted to find an adoptive father for Natalia, the first person he thought of was Gong Jie. This was also the reason why he had considered this. Although it was dangerous, it was also the greatest security. Yun Shusha's idea was really good. After returning from the amusement park, Natalia and Hua Jin's relationship had improved a lot. In addition, before Hua Jin became famous, he had also done a few shows related to children. On Where Are We Going, Daddy, as a substitute father, he had also spent a few episodes with a non-celebrity child. He had some experience in dealing with children and could make Natalia happy. Hua Jin and Natalia's relationship had improved a lot. Logically speaking, Gong Jie should be able to leave in peace. However, Gong Jie was a little reluctant. Therefore, the date of his departure was postponed again and again. Hua Jin repeatedly reminded him and beat around the bush, telling him to focus on his work and that he would take good care of Natalia. In order to take care of Natalia, Hua Jin turned down all the shows that he could. Anyway, Gong Jie had given him a considerable amount of alimony. He did not mind taking a break and taking care of Natalia wholeheartedly. He had even thought about it. After some time, when Natalia and he were closer, he would take her on a trip around the world. Don't be too optimistic. In the end, Gong Jie was reluctant to leave. However, even if he was reluctant to leave, there was nothing he could do. After all, the Hurricane Group's affairs could not be handled without him. Gong Jie had no choice but to leave after being urged again and again by the other party. Before he left, Gong Jie wanted to throw a family reunion for Natalia. What a coincidence. Natalia had been craving Yo-Yo's desserts for a long time, so Gong Jie greeted Yo-Yo and asked him to make desserts for Natalia. Naturally, the boy agreed to it at once. He even patted his chest and promised that he would make a dessert table for Natalia. Therefore, he set the alarm and decided to get up early the next morning to start work. However, something unexpected happened in the morning. The next morning, he woke up. However, the person who woke up was not Yo-Yo. Gong Fan opened his eyes. He felt as if a century had passed since the last time he fell asleep. He was woken up by Yo-Yo's alarm. He was still sleepy. However, Yun Shusha also heard the alarm and walked in to wake him up. However, she also realized that the person who woke up was not Yo-Yo but Gong Fan. Yun Shusha's head thudded and she was stunned. Her first reaction was, "Oh my god, it was Gong Fan. He was awake." Her second reaction was, "Did Gong Fan know how to make a dessert table?" The answer was obvious. No. Chapter 4108. Gong Fan did not notice Yun Shusha's strange gaze. "Good morning, Mommy." "Good morning, you're up so early?" Yun Shusha smiled. Gong Fan was also a little surprised. "I was woken up by the alarm." "Why did I wake up so early?" I'll go prepare breakfast for you. Get ready to get up and wash your face and brush your teeth." Yun Shusha hurriedly left, wondering if she should report to Gong Jie. Gong Fan saw that Yun Shusha left in a hurry and found it strange. He instinctively went to the bedside cabinet to search for something. After searching for a while, he suddenly found a notebook. He picked it up and flipped through a few pages. Yo-Yo had the habit of keeping a diary, and so did Gong Fan. Rather than calling it a diary, it was more like a way for Yo-Yo and Gong Fan to communicate. Yo-Yo understood what happened to Gong Fan that day through his diary. Gong Fan also understood what happened to Yo-Yo over the past few days through Yo-Yo's diary. This time, Gong Fan slept for a long time. He did not know why, but when he woke up again, it was actually half a month later. He actually slept for half a month. 15 days. In the past, he had never slept for such a long time. Before he could figure out the reason, Gong Fan suddenly flipped to the latest page of the diary. "I must wake up early tomorrow to make a dessert table for Natalia. She has been thinking about it for a long time. I've decided to make her a Hello Kitty-themed dessert table. At night, I'll prepare the tools and wait for work to start the next day. But I'm a little worried. What if Gong Fan wakes up? He doesn't know anything about baking. Gong Fan was silent. Hello Kitty. Dessert table? What was that? Dessert? And, who was Natalia? This name had already been mentioned in several pages. Looking at the name, it seemed to be a girl, but, who was it? Gong Fan put the notebook aside and sorted out his emotions. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, he walked into the living room. Xiao Ichen had already finished his breakfast and was looking at him expectantly. Yo-Yo, why are you taking so long? Hurry up and finish your breakfast, we have to set off. Gong Fan narrowed his eyes. Yo-Yo. When Xiao Ichen heard her tone, he shuddered and hurriedly corrected himself. Fan, don't call me Fan. Gong Fan didn't like such a greeting. Xiao Ichen hurriedly explained, but that sounds so intimate. Gong Fan immediately expressed his refusal. No. Xiao Ichen was speechless. What at Sunder Fan? Yun Shusha brought out the bread and milk. Gong Fan sat at the dining table and asked curiously, Mommy, who is Natalia? She said vaguely, Yo-Yo seems to like her. He promised her that he would make her a beautiful dessert table today. Do you know how to make it? Gong Fan shook his head. How could he know how to cook? He didn't know anything. Not to mention baking. Then, Yun Shusha was in a dilemma. What should we do then? Yo-Yo had prepared everything and wanted to perform well today. Gong Fan pursed his lips. He was in a dilemma, but he didn't want to disappoint Yo-Yo. Is the dessert table very difficult? Xiao Ichen and Yun Shusha looked at each other and nodded hesitantly. A little. Gong Fan was silent again. Chapter 4109. However, they had already made a promise. No matter what, if another personality suddenly appeared, he had to complete the task at hand on behalf of the other personality. In the past, it seemed that Yo-Yo had been cleaning up his messes. That was fine. Now, he couldn't possibly back out. Along the way, Gong Fan held onto his cell phone. He wasn't playing with it. Instead, he was studying it seriously. He looked up tutorials and techniques on baking on the internet and made use of the limited time he had to study hard. Yun Shusha was quite confident in Gong Fan. Baking was actually not difficult. As long as he was careful, serious, and slightly particular about the food, he would be able to complete it very well. However, it was obvious that she had made a mistake in her estimation in some aspects. Gong Fan was very particular about everything except food. As the food party, he was very particular about it, but he didn't pay attention to how to complete a dish. When they arrived at Natalia's house, the car stopped. Gong Fan still looked confused. He couldn't figure it out. He didn't even know what butter was and what cheese was. What was a mold and what was saccharine? Should he give up? He really couldn't figure out what these formulas were made of. If he was given dozens of mathematical Olympiad questions, it would still be relatively easy. Wasn't it difficult for him to bake? However, Gong Fan could only imagine Yo-Yo's disappointed expression in the diary. It seems that I should let you sleep for a longer time. Gong Fan suddenly remembered that he seemed to have been in a deep sleep during this period. Could it be that? Was it someone who had been pressing on him and not letting him wake up? Could it be that Yo-Yo despised him for being a scammer? Didn't want him to show his face? If this baking wasn't done well, Yo-Yo might be very angry. Gong Fan held his forehead helplessly. It didn't matter who was angry, but he couldn't be angry at this little ancestor. Hence, when he walked to the kitchen, Gong Fan could only bite the bullet and put on the cartoon-style apron that Hua Jin had bought. He stood in the baking area with a gloomy expression. Oven, mold, cream, all the tools were available. These were all prepared by Yo-Yo. It was all for this day to give Natalia a surprise. All right. Surprise. There was surprise but no joy. Gong Fan told himself, don't worry about the adjustment of the formula or the heat. Just roll up your sleeves and do it based on your feelings. He did not believe that even though they were two personalities, Yo-Yo could cook so well while he could not. Come at me directly. Gong Fan simply followed his intuition and started to do it. The dessert rack is Hello Kitty was pink in color, so Yo-Yo's original idea was to have strawberry-flavored desserts. The dessert counter consisted of multi-layer cakes, cupcakes, shaped biscuits, mousse, pudding, and other small desserts. He tried the donut first. According to the recipe and tutorial, Gong Fan carefully added the softened butter with fine sugar and salt. Wait a minute. Salt. He was stunned for a moment and read the tutorial 3 times to make sure that he was not mistaken. He still felt strange. Aren't donuts supposed to be sweet? Why add salt? Forget it. Gong Fan closed his eyes and began to beat it evenly with the egg beater. His ideal was to make it slightly puffy. In the end, it was directly turned into liquid by him. Liquid, failure. Chapter 41:10. He originally thought that everything was difficult at the beginning, but he didn't expect that the next step would definitely be much more difficult than the beginning. Next, the tutorial said to add milk powder. Milk powder. What was milk powder? Gong Fan looked at the circle of packaging bags on the dining table. Most of them were imported ingredients. If it was in English, he could still understand it, but some were in Italian and some were in French. Moreover, even if it was in English, he didn't know what this thing was. Hence, he decided to taste it himself. It was milk powder. It should be easy to identify. He reached his finger into a packaging table and gently tasted it. Oh? What was this? It was astringent, and the powder was a little smooth. There was also an inexplicable bitter taste. It shouldn't be milk powder. Milk powder should be sweet. He tasted another generation. Flour? Gong Fan tried many kinds of powdery things and finally found milk powder. Suddenly, he felt a sense of relief. I finally found you. Fortunately, I didn't give up. He was filled with emotions in his heart, so he wanted to gently shake the milk powder into the mixing bowl. Rustle. Gong Fan was silent. Looking at about half a bowl of milk powder, he was a little confused. It seemed that there was a little too much milk powder. However, the formula didn't seem to say how much milk powder to add. This amount should be just right, right? If there was too much milk powder, then the subsequent ingredients should be slightly more. There shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, he liked milk powder. Gong Fan made up his mind, so he braced himself and continued to do it. He cracked 4 eggs and accidentally broke the eggshell shards into the egg. The shards were mixed into the thick egg liquid and couldn't be picked out no matter how hard he tried. He simply used chopsticks and finally picked out the fragments. He added dry yeast, flour, and butter one after another. He directly kneaded the dough into a ball and threw it into the toaster with a thud. Yoon Shusha, who was passing by the kitchen, heard this strange sound and was a little worried, so she sneaked into the kitchen. Gong Fan was rummaging through the cupboards in search of strawberry-flavored chocolate sauce, so he didn't notice Yoon Shusha sneaking in. The dough was a little big, and the toaster was buzzing. Soon, after 10 minutes, Gong Fan opened the toaster and took out the hot dough with gloves. At that time, the dough had already fermented and was bigger than before. However, why does it feel so hard? It clearly said that the dough would be softer than before when it was taken out of the toaster. Forget it. Gong Fan used his hand to press out the gas inside. In the end, he accidentally cracked the dough. Should I add more water? That wouldn't do. This step wasn't mentioned in the tutorial. He hadn't reached the final step yet. Perhaps this was a normal phenomenon. Yes, its existence was reasonable. Gong Fan left the fermented dough to dry for 10 minutes before he started to fiddle with the strawberry chocolate sauce. The strawberry chocolate sauce was ready-made, so all he had to do was mix it according to the right ratio. Chapter 41:11. Why did it feel like something that Yo-Yo did with such ease had become a stumbling block when it came to him? Baking was so difficult. Gong Fan felt that his head was about to become twice as big. He braced himself and started to roll the dough. In the end, he was so busy that he finally used the mold to cut the donuts into circles. He spread the strawberry jam evenly on the donuts and walked to the pan of oil. Yoon Shusha did not want to disturb his great undertaking at first, but when she saw that he was about to put the donuts with strawberry jam into the pan, she wanted to stop him. Splash, crackle, Oil splattered everywhere. Gong Fan calmly held the pan in his hand and expressionlessly blocked the oil that was about to splash on his face. His expression was ice cold. After about 10 seconds, he turned off the fire and approached the pan of oil. Only then did he realize that there was something charred on the surface of the oil. He did not know that applying the strawberry jam was a step that could only be done after the oil was out of the pan. If he put the strawberry jam into the pan of oil, it would be charred. He looked at the 2 black balls of donuts, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. Gong Fan carefully scooped up the 2 balls of donuts. Looking at the 2 balls of donuts, he could not help but feel a little worried. What was this? He had been busy for a long time, and these 2 donuts were actually charred. Gong Fan's eyelids twitched violently. The resentment in his heart towards the donuts gradually rose. No. He could not accept such a passable product. He had to start over. It was still early anyway. Gong Fan had lost count of how many donut-making trips. Yoon Shusha watched from behind. Looking at Gong Fan's calm but flustered appearance, she could not help but want to laugh. He was calm because no matter how troublesome it was, he was still expressionless. He was flustered because he could always make the simple steps in Yo-Yo's hands very complicated. Crackle! The donuts were put into the pan of oil for the 3rd time. Behind him, Xiao Chen also tiptoed into the kitchen and quietly stood behind him, watching with Yoon Shusha. When the donuts were ready, they finally had the shape that a donut should have. Of course, as for the taste, that was another matter. The desserts from Gong Fan's hands would definitely not taste good. For some reason, this was Yoon Shusha's intuition. Gong Fan did not notice that Hua Jin had also walked in behind him. The 3 of them stared at him with their mouths agape as he made desserts. Tragic. How tragic. It was extremely tragic. Could it be any more tragic? Hua Jin looked at the trash can. There were several black pancakes, and his heart ached. At the same time, there was some drumming. She wondered how palatable the donut that Gong Fan had made would be. Could it be food poisoning? Why don't I let little Ichen test the poison first and see if it's edible? I don't want Natalia to get food poisoning after eating his donut. I have a feeling that Fan Fan isn't making donuts, whispered little Ichen as he inched closer to his mother's ear. Yoon Shusha heard this and held back her laughter. She asked in return, if it's not donuts, then what is it? Xiao Ichen frowned seriously. It's poison. Yoon Shusha was speechless. Mommy, can I not eat it? Xiao Ichen trembled. I'm scared. Chapter 41:12. Fan Fan, is this a donut? Hua Jin asked curiously. When Gong Fan heard the voice, he turned around abruptly and saw 4 people standing behind him, looking at his creation. He grunted and said, donuts. Hua Jin, on the other hand, was wondering if this thing could be eaten. Would it look a little scary? Perhaps it would be able to cope with it after eating it. Hence, he instructed Xiao Ichen, go and try it. What do you think of the taste? Xiao Ichen was shocked. He didn't expect Hua Jin to push him into the fire pit. Why didn't he try it himself? He was obviously asking him to test the poison. Xiao Ichen pouted, obviously unhappy. He asked in return, why don't you try it? Xiao Fan's desserts must be delicious. As Hua Jin spoke, he glanced at him from the corner of his eye. Why? Do you think Fan Fan's desserts taste bad? Gong Fan couldn't be bothered with how Hua Jin addressed him. Instead, he glared at Xiao Ichen and snorted. Why? Do you think it tastes bad? Xiao Ichen gulped and shook his head vigorously. No. I believe in my brother's cooking. Then try it. Try? Xiao Ichen was so shocked that he couldn't speak. What the hell? Had he really become a test subject for poison? He felt terrible. He wanted to cry. Why was his life so hard? He was always pushed out to do such things at critical moments. However, Xiao Ichen didn't want to offend his brother. He immediately took a step forward righteously and looked like he was ready to die. Okay, I'll try it. Gong Fan was unhappy when he saw his brother's expression. He looked like he was about to jump into the fire pit. You don't seem willing. Why would I? Xiao Ichen looked at him reproachfully. I think it should taste good. Then don't look like that. Xiao Chen was speechless. He let out an "oh" and had no choice but to accept his fate and pick up a donut. Looking at the burnt surface, he hardened his heart, gritted his teeth, and took a bite. A comet colliding with Earth, volcano eruption, various apocalyptic scenes flashed before his eyes. Xiao Chen felt as if his entire body was being scorched by lava, and tears almost flowed out of his eyes. What was that? Is this a donut? There was no sweetness at all. It was like eating a piece of charred coal. Not only was the color similar, but the taste was also exactly the same. It tasted so bad that he wanted to cry. Even taking a punch wasn't as painful as this. However, even someone like Xiao Chen, who had a strong tolerance, did not frown. He only snorted and said calmly, "Not bad." Gong Fan's eyes lit up. "Really? Yes, it's true, but I don't think it's the kind of smell Natalia likes. Is it too sweet?" Gong Fan muttered again, "I did put a little too much milk powder and saccharine." Xiao Chen muttered to himself, it would be better if it was unreasonably sweet. At least there was sweetness. What was this smell? This was the smell of charcoal. It was bitter and astringent. Why were the two personalities, Gong Fan and Yo-Yo, so different when they were clearly the same person? Xiao Chen couldn't help but miss Yo-Yo. "You don't look well." Gong Fan sized him up and became suspicious. Chapter 41:13. When Yun Shusha heard this, she inexplicably despised her son. "Xiao Chen, you're really good at lying through your teeth. It's fine if it doesn't taste good, but you even put on an act." However, Yun Shusha was touched. Xiao Chen must have been afraid that Gong Fan would be disappointed and upset, so he endured the taste and pretended that it tasted good. "It's delicious." Xiao Chen gave Gong Fan an exaggerated thumbs up. When Gong Fan heard this, he was inexplicably touched. It turned out that the donuts he made were this delicious. Even Xiao Chen was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat the donuts he made in the future. Gong Fan pursed his lips and revealed a rare gentle smile. "It's okay. In the future, if you want to eat it, I'll make it for you, okay?" When Xiao Chen heard this, he was so shocked that he almost couldn't close his mouth. He clicked his tongue and looked helplessly at Yun Shusha. At that moment, Yun Shusha could only look helplessly at the sky and pretend that she wasn't there. Hua Jin tried his best to cover his mouth and snigger. This was too funny. What kind of mother would trick her own son? However, this Gong Fan was so smart that he couldn't tell that Xiao Chen was just being perfunctory. How was it delicious? Just by looking at its appearance, one could tell that it tasted terrible. Moreover, looking at Xiao Chen's pained and embarrassed expression, it was enough to prove that this thing tasted terrible. Hua Jin shuddered in his heart. He was deeply in awe of Gong Fan's culinary skills. Gong Jie glanced at Xiao Chen and then at Hua Jin and winked. Hua Jin carefully leaned over and discussed with him, "Why don't we explain the situation to Natalia and forget about the dessert table? If we really let Natalia eat this, she'll definitely be poisoned." It was rare that Gong Jie agreed with her. "Yes." With that, he raised his head and said to Gong Fan, "Xiao Fan, you don't have to make desserts." When Gong Fan heard this, he was puzzled. "Why?" "Because," Gong Jie frowned and made up a lie. "Natalia has a cold. She shouldn't eat anything too sweet. How about this?" When Gong Fan heard this, he raised his eyebrows and complained, "I've worked so hard for so long and finally made the donuts. You're telling me that she has a cold and doesn't want to eat them? Couldn't you have told me earlier?" "Gong Jie, the desserts you make have to be King edible. Is this food edible? Even puppies don't eat it." Hua Jin looked at Gong Fan, but he couldn't bear it. Especially when he saw the disappointment in his eyes, he felt an inexplicable sense of helplessness. Gong Fan had worked so hard to make it, he couldn't possibly let it go to waste. Forget it, he couldn't let his painstaking efforts go to waste. Hua Jin thought that he had sacrificed his life for the sake of righteousness and should eat a piece of the donut he made. He didn't want the little guy to work so hard for nothing and feel disappointed. Although he knew that this donut would definitely taste terrible, he knew in his heart that it would definitely taste like wax when he saw Xiao Chen's expression. However, he had to warm the little guy's heart. Hence, Hua Jin clenched his fists and made an important decision. When Xiao Chen saw Hua Jin walking over, he was shocked. He desperately winked at Hua Jin, telling him not to touch Hua Jin's dark cuisine. However, Hua Jin didn't see it. Until Hua Jin stuffed a piece of donut into his mouth. Boom, Hua Jin was shocked. Chapter 41:14. What was this taste? This feeling, it was as if his brain had been blown up by an atomic bomb. It was crispy on the inside and tender on the outside. It's so hard. Hua Jin had just uttered these two words when Gong Fan narrowed his eyes in alarm. Does it taste bad? No, Hua Jin used a Herculean effort to swallow that lump of black stuff. His entire mouth was filled with an inexplicable sandy texture and bitterness. It felt as if he had swallowed a mouthful of black soil. To be able to make a donut taste like this was also a skill. Hua Jin quickly corrected himself. It's so delicious that it's hard to describe. Gong Fan was stunned. At the side, Gong Jie and Xiao Chen glanced at him in disdain. Was this PUBG? He could actually make such a big turn. Gong Fan was very smart. Even if he was initially fooled by Xiao Chen's superb acting skills, he would still be able to tell that the donut tasted really bad. Hua Jin's words could lie, but his eyes and micro-expressions couldn't. In other words, no matter how good his acting skills were, he couldn't hide the fact that the donut tasted bad. Was it really that bad? He muttered in his heart and glanced at the black donut on the plate. He didn't believe it, so he took a piece and took a bite. Dong, he almost fell to the ground. Yun Shusha was frightened and hurried over to support him. Gong Fan struggled to support himself on the table and waved his hand gently to indicate that he was fine. However, when he turned around, Yun Shusha saw that his face was gloomy and full of disappointment. It tastes so bad. He had never eaten anything so disgusting. Although he didn't want to admit it, the donut tasted really bad. He emptied the entire plate of failed products into the bin expressionlessly. Everyone was silent. They didn't know whether to laugh or console him. Gong Fan sounded a little lonely. Is Yo-Yo's food delicious? Yun Shusha said helplessly. He's better at cooking. Oh. With a thud, Gong Fan's head drooped as low as it could go. It was obvious that he was utterly disappointed. He had a competitive personality and was unwilling to do anything worse than others. However, in this aspect, he really couldn't compare to Yo-Yo, so he felt a little sad. At the same time, he was somewhat unwilling. Yo-Yo was so outstanding that he dared not look her in the eye. He had made this donut very seriously and had even failed several times. But why did he still fail this time? Gong Fan felt inexplicably frustrated. Yun Shusha rubbed his head helplessly and said, "All right, don't be sad. Actually, it's not bad that you managed to do it for the first time. It was Mommy's first time cooking, and it didn't taste as good as yours. You're like Mommy in this aspect. Mommy doesn't seem to have any talent in this area." When Gong Fan heard this, the sadness in his heart eased a little. Really? Yes, really. So you see, when has Mommy ever cooked before? It's always Yo-Yo who cooks. Mommy doesn't know how to cook or make desserts. When Gong Fan heard this, he felt upset. I'll study it more next time. Who knows, I might have a talent for making desserts too. When Xiao Chen heard this, he didn't know why, but he quivered. Chapter 41:15. Xiao Chen quickly comforted him. Actually, you don't have to. Look, if you're not good at cooking, you don't have to try it. Gong Fan was a little suspicious when he heard this. Why? Do you think I don't have talent in this area? Yes. However, Xiao Chen did not dare to say it out loud. He only said vaguely, I think you're better than Yo-Yo in many aspects. For example, didn't you come up with the Deva Eye project? I heard from my uncle that although the idea of the Deva Eye project is shocking, if it succeeds, Hurricane will control the global market. When Gong Fan heard this, he did not know why, but there was a hint of loneliness in his eyes. The so-called Deva Eye project is actually built on Yo-Yo's blueprints. Without his blueprints, even if I came up with this project, it would be a pipe dream. Xiao Chen was speechless. But you're very good at business. But Yo-Yo's business philosophy is not worse than mine. Xiao Chen was even more speechless. Gong Fan pursed his lips and said calmly, "All of you, get out. I'll try again. Even if I don't make it into a dessert table, I'll make it into a donut." He did not want to disappoint Yo-Yo. He did not want him to think that he was useless. No matter what, he still wanted to give it a try. When Hua Jin and Gong Jie heard this, they looked at each other. Yun Shusha smiled faintly and said, "If he wants to make it himself, why don't we let him try again? No matter what this child does, he always wants to finish what he started." Although she knew that cooking was also a matter of talent, she did not know how to cook, and Mu Yaja was not very good at it either. However, Yo-Yo was a natural at cooking. She could only say that he was very talented in cooking and had a keen sense of smell when it came to food. This was something that they could not achieve. Whether it was genetic mutation or Yo-Yo's unique talent, cooking depended on one's intuition. Some people, even if they had never learned how to cook, could make anything taste good. Yo-Yo could even create many dishes that could not be found in restaurants all over the world. The four of them left the kitchen quietly. Gong Fan looked at the kitchen counter silently. In the end, he took a deep breath, rolled up his sleeves, and started from scratch. At the door, Natalia secretly pushed the door open and peeked through the gap. She saw a slender figure standing in front of the kitchen counter. She looked around and saw that he was the only one in the huge kitchen, so she tiptoed in. She quietly stood behind Gong Fan and quietly watched him stir the egg. Gong Fan was so focused on what he was doing that he did not realize that there was someone standing behind him. Natalia's footsteps were very light. No matter how sharp Gong Fan was, he did not notice her appearance for a moment. Until Natalia looked at the dessert that he hadn't finished making and asked curiously, "Did the dessert table fail today?" Gong Fan was shocked. He did not realize that there was someone beside him. He turned his head abruptly and saw that it was Natalia. He was a little surprised. You are?" Natalia opened her eyes and blinked slightly. There was some confusion in her gaze. "You forgot about me?" Gong Fan frowned and pondered for a moment. He quickly guessed her identity. Natalia. Chapter 41:16. Gong Fan took a deep look at Natalia. He was deeply attracted by her purple eyes. He had never seen purple eyes before. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Gong Fan couldn't help but fall into a daze and couldn't react for a moment. Natalia was also stunned. She immediately recognized that although the child in front of her had Yo-Yo's body, he wasn't Yo-Yo. She seemed to have heard that Yo-Yo had dual personality. Natalia carefully observed Gong Fan's somewhat unfamiliar expression and pouted slightly. "You're him, right?" Gong Fan was stunned and didn't understand what she meant. Natalia reminded him, "What's your name?" Gong Fan?" Gong Fan was shocked. "How do you know my name?" Natalia revealed a smug expression. "I heard Auntie Alice mention you before. One is Gong Fan, the other is Yo-Yo." Gong Fan saw that there was nowhere to hide his identity, so he said calmly, "Yes, it's me, I see." Natalia turned around with her back facing him. She closed her eyes and decided to tell him her secret. "Actually, I'm the same as you." Gong Fan was stunned for a moment and quickly understood what she meant. "You're also, yes. I have an older sister who looks exactly like me. Her name is Natalia Lisa. However, I've always been very afraid of her." "Why?" "She's very bad." Natalia furrowed her brows, her expression solemn. "She will hurt me and others. So, I'm very afraid of her. However, it's as if she lives in my body. I can't chase her away no matter how hard I try." When Gong Fan heard this, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he hesitated. He actually wanted to ask, between Natalia and Natalia, who was the main personality and who was the second personality. However, he opened his mouth and hesitated. In the end, he didn't say anything. "Sometimes, I'll see her in my dreams. She'll stand there and smile coldly at me. I'll feel afraid, but I can't move. At this time, I'll wake up covered in cold sweat." Gong Fan listened seriously. He was the only one who could fit into her world. Because he understood the world of dual personalities. Natalia turned around with her hands behind her back. She was wearing a dress and looked as cute as a doll. However, sometimes, I would fall asleep. Once I fall asleep, it would always be for a very long time. My consciousness is clearly very happy, but my eyes are closed. No matter how hard I try, I can't open my eyes. Gong Fan also had such a resonance. I do that sometimes too. I'll sleep for a long time. No matter how hard I try to open my eyes, all I see is darkness. Natalia's voice suddenly turned cold. It feels like I'm dead. Gong Fan's body stiffened. Indeed, this feeling was no different from being a walking corpse. Do you know? Natalia asked him. I've had electroshock therapy before. Electroshock treatment. Gong Fan realized that the electroshock treatment she was talking about was the insane treatment plan that Yun Shusha had mentioned before. It used electric shocks to inflict pain on people. I know that Romanka wants to chase Natalia Lisa out of my body, but Natalia always hides in my body. I can only bear the pain. Chapter 41:17. Gong Fan was silent for a while before he suddenly asked curiously, Have you heard of the land of death? Natalia turned around, her eyes glinting. Are you referring to the land of exile? The land of exile? Yes. I heard the patients in the hospital mention it before. For people like us, that place is destined to be our home. Natalia paused for a moment, and her gaze deepened. What's the difference between not being needed and being exiled? Gong Fan looked at her purple eyes and his heart suddenly palpitated. For some reason, he did not dare to look into her eyes. That pair of purple eyes seemed to have an indescribable magic. It was as if he looked at them for too long, he would be bewitched. Gong Fan turned around and did not look into her eyes anymore. Natalia curled her lips and walked to his side with her hands behind her back. Her voice suddenly became slow and lazy. Are you willing to be exiled? What? Do you want to go there? Gong Fan pursed his lips and suddenly said, I won't go there. Why? Natalia was a little puzzled. Are you so sure? They won't give up on me. You're the second personality, right? Natalia's words woke him up. Gong Fan's eyes regained focus and he said in surprise, How do you know that I'm the second personality? I see the same aura in you as mine. Natalia let out a crisp laugh. Uneasiness, confusion, and a kind of loneliness that comes from being afraid of being abandoned. Don't you feel that you've been abandoned? Natalia said, Sometimes. Do you fall into a deep sleep for a long time? Gong Fan was shocked. Could it be? Natalia was the second personality. Natalia Lisa was the first personality. Gong Fan turned around in surprise and his gaze landed on Natalia. However, she suddenly reached out a finger and gently pressed it against her lips. Shh. He watched as she raised a hand and stretched it in front of him. Her fingertips opened slightly and a pocket watch suddenly fell and gently swayed in front of him. It began to sway. Now, you don't have to think or see anything. You just have to close your eyes and listen to what you can hear. Natalia's words seemed to have some sort of magical power. Her breath smelled like orchids, and her cherry blossom-colored lips moved slightly as she spat out a few words with a languid tone. Did you hear that? Crack. 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 The sound of the pocket watches ticking suddenly drowned out all the noise. In that instant, all Gong Fan could hear was the sound of the needle turning. Crack. Crack. Gong Fan suddenly felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier. He tried his best to open his eyes, but his eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Gradually, he could no longer hold on. His eyelids gradually closed, and his world gradually fell into darkness. Daddy, Gong Jie and Hua Jin were sitting in the living room when they suddenly heard a kitten-like sound. Hua Jin stood up and saw Natalia leaning against the door. She said timidly, It's Yo-Yo again, what's wrong? Hua Jin saw that she had sneaked into the kitchen and was a little curious. Chapter 41:18. It's not like that, Natalia said hesitantly, it seems like, he suddenly fainted. What? While Hua Jin and Gong Jie were still stunned, Yun Shusha and Xiaochen did not have time to say a word. They stood up nervously and walked toward the kitchen. When they walked into the kitchen, they saw Gong Fan leaning against the wall and lying on the ground. His face was pale. Yun Shusha walked over uneasily, picked him up, and gently patted his face. Fan, Xiao Chen saw that Gong Fan was unconscious and was scared out of his wits. Should we call an ambulance? Gong Jie and Hua Jin also walked in. When they saw the unconscious Gong Fan in Yun Shusha's arms, their expressions changed drastically. What's going on? Natalia followed them in. Hua Jin caught a glimpse of her from the corner of his eye and immediately asked her anxiously, "What's going on? Why did he suddenly faint when he was fine just now?" I don't know either, Natalia said innocently. When I walked in, I found him unconscious here. What should I do? Should I call an ambulance? Hua Jin was stunned. For some reason, the Natalia in front of him gave him a very unfamiliar feeling. It was as if he had never seen her before. She was different from the timid little girl who spoke cautiously when they first met. Even though her gaze seemed worried and uneasy, it was terrifyingly dark. Hua Jin was also aware that Natalia had dissociative identity disorder. Gong Jie had entrusted Natalia to him and told him about this in advance. However, no one had ever seen Natalia's second personality. Therefore, no one knew what Natalia's second personality was like. However, Hua Jin had an intuition that was even more terrifying than a sixth sense. The person in front of him was not Natalia at all. However, his guess seemed to have no evidence. Perhaps, it was just his imagination running wild. Hua Jin's attention was still completely focused on Gong Fan. Xiao Chen was about to take out his phone to call the ambulance when Yun Shusha noticed Gong Fan's eyelids twitching. She called out in delight, "Fan?" Gong Fan hummed softly and finally opened his eyes. Seeing that he was awake, Yun Shusha finally heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed her brows. "Are you feeling unwell?" Gong Fan was still in a daze. His vision gradually overlapped and regained focus. Only then did he see the person in front of him clearly. He called out softly, "Mommy." She sounded so weak that anyone who heard it couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Yun Shusha said worriedly, "You suddenly fainted. What happened? Are you feeling unwell?" Gong Fan looked around. When he heard Yun Shusha say that he had fainted, he was a little surprised. "Did I faint just now?" Yun Shusha said, "You gave us a fright." Gong Fan was also a little confused. He had no impression of what had happened just now. He only remembered that when he was still making desserts, he suddenly felt dizzy and fainted instantly. "I don't know what happened either." Gong Fan supported his body gently and held his forehead. "Probably, I didn't sleep well last night." He didn't know how to explain it and could only make up a random reason to stop Yun Shusha from worrying. Chapter 41:19. Didn't sleep well? Even if she didn't sleep well, she wouldn't have fainted. However, no one knew what had happened to him. The doctor couldn't find anything even if they went to the hospital. Ever since Yo-Yo returned, Yun Shusha knew that Yo-Yo had been trying to get along with Yo-Yo peacefully. However, just as Alice said, with two personalities coexisting, Yo-Yo would not be able to hold on any longer. Yun Shusha didn't know what he meant by not being able to hold on. However, seeing Gong Fan suddenly faint, it was hard for her not to link the two together. "If you're tired, go back to your room and rest for a while, okay?" Gong Fan nodded gently, but he was a little reluctant. "Will I fall asleep and sleep for a few days?" Yun Shusha understood what he meant. He was worried that if he fell asleep, the next time he woke up might be a few days later. Yun Shusha's heart ached for him, so she comforted him gently. Then, "Mommy will stay with you, okay? Just lie on the bed. Mommy won't leave, okay?" Gong Fan nodded his head lightly. Yun Shusha carried Gong Fan and stood up. Gong Fan had grown taller and heavier, so it wasn't as easy to carry him as before. Xiao Chen supported him a little. With the man in her arms, Yun Shusha turned around and said guiltily, "I'm sorry, Natalia. Today, he's not feeling well. We'll talk about the dessert counter later, but since he promised to cook for you, he'll definitely keep his promise." "But today..." Natalia was stunned and hurriedly said, "It's okay. If he's not feeling well, he can lie on the bed for a while." "Okay." Yun Shusha carried Gong Fan to the bedroom. Hua Jin said, "I'll go get 2 cups of hot water and send them to the room." Gong Jie nodded. "Go ahead." In the bedroom, Yun Shusha gently placed Gong Fan on the bed and covered him with the blanket. Just as she was about to get up to draw the curtains, Gong Fan thought that she was going to leave and nervously tugged at her clothes. When Yun Shusha saw this, she laughed involuntarily and said softly, "Mommy is going to draw the curtains. Don't leave, okay?" Only then did Gong Fan release his fingers in relief. Yun Shusha drew the curtains and immediately returned to the bedside. When she saw Gong Fan's gaze on her, she knew that he was afraid that she would accidentally fall asleep, so she secretly left. She was clear in her heart. Gong Fan's dependence on her was even greater than Yo-Yo's on her. She took off her coat and crawled under the blankets. Hugging him, she coaxed, "You don't believe Mommy's words." "Of course. Mommy said I won't leave and will stay here with you." "I feel like you don't believe me." Gong Fan bit his lips and did not say anything. Yun Shusha gently pinched the tip of his nose and said helplessly, "Mommy doesn't mean to blame you. I just feel that if you're tired, you can close your eyes and sleep peacefully. If you don't want to sleep, you can close your eyes. Mommy will accompany you." "Mommy, yes. I want to hear you sing." Gong Fan paused and immediately said, "It's okay if you don't sing. Talk to me." When Yun Shusha heard this, she asked, "What song do you want to listen to?" "Anything is fine." He didn't know why, but all of a sudden, he was extremely tired. He really wanted to sleep, but he couldn't sleep well. If he listened to her voice, it would probably be better. That was what he thought. Chapter 41:20. Outside the door, Xiao Chen stood at the door. Through the gap, he saw Yun Shusha hugging Gong Fan in the bedroom. He frowned and turned around with a grave expression. Hua Jin stood behind him with 2 glasses of water in his hands. He lowered his voice and asked, "How is he? Has he fallen asleep?" Xiao Chen shook his head. "I can't see clearly, but Mommy is coaxing him to sleep." Then, Hua Jin looked at the 2 glasses of water in his hands. "Should I bring this in?" "Don't. We don't want to disturb little brother." "Okay." Hua Jin turned around and placed the glasses of water on the cabinet. His expression was grave. Gong Fan's sudden fainting was not a small matter. Why would something like this happen out of the blue? Has he been like this in the past? Hua Jin couldn't help but ask. Little Chen shook his head. "No, I don't." Then, Xiao Chen continued, "Little brother has never fainted out of the blue. Although he wasn't in good health in the past, this has never happened before." Gong Jie walked over and peeked through the gap in the door. When he saw the mother and son lying on the bed, he was relieved and gently closed the door. Let him sleep for a while. Hua Jin knew that Gong Jie was very knowledgeable. He asked worriedly, "Is he all right?" Gong Jie glanced at him with disdain. "How would I know?" "All right," he had asked for nothing. "I also feel that there is something unusual about him fainting this time." Gong Jie paused and said, "I'll ask Alice later. We can't jump to conclusions now." "Okay." After Gong Jie and Xiao Chen walked away, Hua Jin turned around and suddenly saw a slender figure standing at the door of another room not far away. He focused his gaze and saw that it was Natalia. He saw her leaning against the door and secretly looking over. When she realized that Hua Jin was looking at her, she was obviously stunned. She did not think that she would be discovered, so she quickly closed the door. Hua Jin frowned and narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Natalia's second personality? Gong Jie held the glass of water and his expression froze for a moment. "I have never seen it before. I feel that Natalia is a little strange today. Also, didn't you say that she has a split personality? I don't think I've seen her second personality." Gong Jie became suspicious when he heard that. "Now that you mention it, I did forget that she has dual personality disorder. Gong Fan is Yo-Yo's second personality, Yo-Yo is the main personality, and Gong Fan is the second personality. If Natalia is the main personality, what is the name of the second personality? You're still here now. After you leave, if her second personality appears, a completely unfamiliar personality, I won't be able to handle it." Gong Jie raised his eyebrows. "Are you that reliant on me?" Hua Jin felt extremely awkward when he heard such ambiguous words. "Don't misinterpret my meaning." Gong Jie said, "Who is the one misinterpreting whose meaning?" Hua Jin was speechless again. This man always seemed to have the ability to twist the truth. Xiao Chen understood what Hua Jin meant. You're worried that Natalia's second personality is not a good person? You've never seen Natalia's second personality, right? Chapter 41-21. Hua Jin said this because he felt that Natalia was too strange today. Gong Fan had been fine in the kitchen, but after she walked in, he fainted for no reason. What was even more frightening was that he inadvertently caught a glimpse of Natalia's face as she looked at Gong Fan. There was an indescribable coldness. It made him feel a little unfamiliar. Gong Jie felt a little helpless. He had already stayed here for too long. If he delayed any longer, he was afraid that Hurricane would become a pot of porridge. Hua Jin saw the hesitation on his face and immediately said, "Actually, it's okay if you don't stay. I'll try my best to deal with it. I'll send someone to take good care of her. If there's anything unusual, just tell me directly." Hua Jin nodded. "Okay, got it." Yun Shusha was originally accompanying Gong Fan to sleep. She hummed softly and unknowingly. Little Munchkin in her arms couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell into a deep sleep. Seeing that he had fallen asleep, she wanted to get up, but she was worried that Gong Fan would be sad and disappointed when he woke up and didn't see her by his side. Hence, she decided to sleep with him. When she woke up again, she was startled awake by the sound of someone turning around beside her. She instinctively opened her eyes and saw that Little Munchkin was already awake. She was about to call out Gong Fan when she saw him rubbing his eyes and opening them. His slightly dazed gaze made Yun Shusha realize that the person who had woken up wasn't Gong Fan, but Yo-Yo. "Yo-Yo, you're awake?" Yun Shusha patted his face gently. Yo-Yo opened his eyes and was still in a daze for a while. He was in a daze because when he fell asleep yesterday, it was at night in his own house. When he woke up, he was already in an unfamiliar room. He was very smart and realized that he had been in a deep sleep for some time. The person who had woken up previously was Gong Fan. Yo-Yo's voice was still hoarse from when he had just woken up. "Where am I?" "At Natalia's house." "Hey, how many days has it been since I fell asleep?" "Today is the day we agreed to make a dessert table for Natalia. Have you forgotten?" However, the person who woke up this morning was Gong Fan. "It's understandable that you don't remember him." "Ah," Yo-Yo smacked her head. "What time is it now?" "It's already past noon. I've already asked her for leave." "Why?" Yo-Yo paused and immediately reacted. "Oh, I forgot. Gong Fan doesn't know how to make desserts. He tried to do it for you today. Perhaps he felt that since you agreed to it, even if it was him, he couldn't go against the agreement. So, he bit the bullet and tried it," Yun Shusha explained. When Yo-Yo heard this, she couldn't help but feel helpless. Why would he do that? "Yes, I failed several times." Yun Shusha pondered for a moment. In the morning, Gong Fan suddenly fainted once. "I thought that he didn't sleep well, so I coaxed him to sleep for a while." When Yo-Yo heard this, he nodded and felt a little warm in his heart. He also realized that when he opened his eyes just now, Yun Shusha was stunned for a moment, but she still recognized that he was not Gong Fan, but Yo-Yo. He felt warm in his heart. Chapter 41-22. In the past, when he stood next to Xiao Chen, many people would mistake him for Xiao Chen. Only Yun Shusha could always tell the difference between the two little guys at a glance. However, now, only Yun Shusha could tell the difference between him and Gong Fan. Touched, Yo-Yo hugged Yun Shusha's shoulders and kissed her forehead gently. "Mommy, I love you." "Okay." Yun Shusha hugged him gently. "Are you still sleepy? Do you want to sleep for a while more?" "I'm not sleepy. I just want to hug Mommy like this." As Yo-Yo spoke, he gently snuggled his little head into her embrace. Yun Shusha couldn't help but chide him. "You're already so old, yet you're still so clingy to Mommy. Do you still want to get a wife in the future? A wife is as important as Mommy." "Oh. Our Yo-Yo is really a Mommy's boy. In the future, you're not allowed to stick to Mommy like this. Otherwise, girls won't like Mommy's boy." Yo-Yo pouted and said, "Is it wrong for me to love Mommy? If what Mommy says and does is right, why shouldn't I listen to Mommy? When you grow up, will you still stick to Mommy like this?" Yo-Yo thought for a while and said seriously, "It depends on the situation. If Mommy becomes senile, I definitely won't listen to Mommy. Yoon Shusha's heart ached. When you grow up, Mommy won't become senile either. When Yo-Yo heard this, he laughed. Okay. Mommy is so young. When I'm 30, Mommy will only be 48 years old. Yoon Shusha was angry and amused at the same time. She rubbed his head and said comfortingly, "Close your eyes and rest for a while." Yo-Yo grunted and obediently hugged Yoon Shusha's waist and closed his eyes. Mommy, I feel that it's very strange. Recently, Gong Fan always seems to sleep for a long time without waking up. When Yoon Shusha heard this, she knew that Yo-Yo was worried about Gong Fan. She comforted her gently, "Isn't that good? At the very least, you'll have more time for Mommy to accompany you." But Yo-Yo couldn't bear it. He said sadly, "If that's the case, won't he have less time to see Mommy? He's actually lonelier than I am, and he needs company more. Subconsciously, I also want to give this body to him so that he can spend more time with Mommy, but he's been acting weird lately. He always sleeps for a long time." Yoon Shusha couldn't help but hesitate. She also realized that Yo-Yo had discovered some minor changes in her body. He was a little afraid of these changes, and she was also scared witless. However, no matter what happened, she wanted to be by his side and would be by his side. Don't think too much. No matter what, you can't change anything even if you let your imagination run wild. You just need to know that no matter what happens, Mommy will be by your side. When Yo-Yo heard this, he smiled and said, "Okay." Yo-Yo hugged Yoon Shusha and stayed in bed for a while. He only got up when he was no longer sleepy. At that moment, Hua Jin had already reheated the food. At noon, except for the two of them, everyone else had eaten. It was only then that Yoon Shusha realized that it was already 2 in the afternoon, but she didn't feel hungry at all. Chapter 41-23. Seeing that Yoon Shusha was asking about Natalia, Hua Jin replied, "Yeah, Natalia is taking an afternoon nap. Kids don't have energy if they don't take an afternoon nap." Yo-Yo looked at Yoon Shusha and then at Hua Jin. Seeing that the two of them had different expressions, she didn't know what they were thinking about. Hua Jin sized up Yo-Yo and carefully probed, "You are, idiot, I'm Yo-Yo." Yo-Yo rolled her eyes adorably. "Can't you recognize me?" Hua Jin answered honestly, I really can't recognize you." "Haha." Yo-Yo glanced in the direction of the bedroom, pursed his lips and said, "That guy must have made a mess in the kitchen, right?" Everyone could tell that the clumsy guy he was referring to was Gong Fan. When Hua Jin heard this, he immediately said, "I've already tidied up the kitchen." But Natalia seems very disappointed that she didn't get to eat dessert. "It's okay." Yo-Yo moved her wrists and smiled at Hua Jin. "I'll get the dessert table ready right away. You don't have to force yourself. Since I've promised, I have to do it. Besides, it's okay. I'm not that clumsy guy." With that, Yo-Yo walked into the kitchen. Yoon Shusha said to Gong Jie and Hua Jin, "I'll go and help him." Hua Jin couldn't help but tease her, I feel that you might not be helping him. You might even cause trouble." When Yoon Shusha heard this, she was instantly unhappy. "Are you looking down on me?" Gong Jie couldn't help but say, "Sis, don't go and cause trouble. Everyone knows that you'll cause more trouble than help when you enter the kitchen." Yoon Shusha's face turned red. She was angry and embarrassed. All right. She could only sit down on the sofa obediently. In the afternoon, when it was almost evening, Yo-Yo gently placed the last decorative flower on the cake in the kitchen. With that, the dessert counter was successfully completed. Coincidentally, Natalia had just woken up from her afternoon nap. As soon as she walked out of her room, she smelled a sweet fragrance. She couldn't help but follow the aroma to the dining room, only to find that there was a huge dessert table by the dining table. On top, there were biscuits, donuts, small cakes. They were all pink, exquisite and beautiful. Natalia's eyes widened in shock. She didn't expect the dessert table to be completed. This was probably a beautiful surprise. "You're awake." A voice came from behind. Natalia turned around in confusion. She saw Yo-Yo standing behind her with his hands behind his back and a warm smile on his face. "Do you like it?" "You did this?" Yo-Yo nodded. "Okay. You, Natalia muttered to herself doubtfully for a moment and tried to sound out a name. Yo-Yo. For some reason, Yo-Yo suddenly froze. He suddenly asked, have you seen him before? The him he was referring to was Gong Fan. Natalia understood what he meant and nodded. The one in the morning wasn't you. It was him, right? Yo-Yo nodded. For some reason, his expression changed. He doesn't know how to make desserts. Ah. Chapter 41-24. Yo-Yo was still puzzled. He suddenly asked, how do you know about him? Natalia was stunned. Indeed, no one had mentioned Gong Fan to her. Even Gong Jie and Hua Jin had never mentioned Yo-Yo's double identity disorder to her. Natalia pursed her lips and immediately said, I can tell that you're like me, right? Yo-Yo narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at her deeply. However, he did not say anything in the end. Instead, he hid the suspicion in his eyes and changed the topic. He turned around and asked, do you like the dessert table I made? Natalia walked over slowly and looked at the desserts on the dessert rack. She asked happily, can I eat it now? This is a gift I made for you. It depends on whether you're willing to try it. Yo-Yo was a gentleman. His every word and action were like that of a noble son who had been educated in etiquette. Natalia said sweetly, of course. I love desserts the most. As she spoke, she carefully picked up a donut and couldn't wait to put it into her mouth. Yo-Yo looked at her quietly. There was no trace of emotion on his face. It was as if he was only concerned about whether she liked the dessert he made. Is it good? Yes. Is it as good as the one you ate at the amusement park last time? Natalia said, this must be the best dessert I've ever had in the world. There's no other dessert like it. She asked curiously, have you learned how to bake before? No. I read books and tried to make it myself. So good. Natalia blushed again and said, if I want to eat it again in the future, will you still be willing to make it for me? Of course. If you want to eat it, I can make it anytime. Okay, then it's a deal. Natalia smiled and took a bite of the donut. She wanted to try all the desserts on the dessert rack before she stopped. Yo-Yo looked at her without a trace. His gaze fell on her face, but there was no change in his expression. After dinner, Yo-Yo and Yun Shusha went home. As for the Gong Jie, it was the evening schedule. After dinner, he gave a few instructions to Hua Jin and left. Before they left, Natalia was still reluctant to leave. She hugged him and refused to leave. Hua Jin stood by the side and watched. Gong Jie naturally couldn't bear to part with her, so she coaxed her gently and promised that she would come back as soon as possible. Only then did Natalia let go of her hand and let her go. Even after Gong Jie had left for a long time, Natalia was still standing by the window. Under the cold moonlight, the side of her face seemed to be covered with a layer of silver. After finishing a glass of champagne, Hua Jin finally stood up and walked to Natalia's side. All of a sudden, he reached out and gently closed the window. Natalia looked up at him in surprise. Hua Jin said slowly, it's getting cold. The wind is too strong. Don't catch a cold. Oh. Natalia couldn't hide the disappointment in her eyes. She turned around and walked back to her room dejectedly. Hua Jin looked at her back in silence. Finally, he couldn't suppress the suspicion in his heart. He took a deep breath and suddenly spoke. Who are you? His voice was very soft. Even if a needle fell to the ground, it would be able to drown out his voice. However, Natalia heard it very clearly. Her back stiffened. Chapter 41-25. Who am I? Natalia was obviously amused by his question. She turned around gracefully, her skirt fluttering in a beautiful arc. She smiled with her hands behind her back, as cute as a doll. I'm Natalia. You know my name. Hua Jin took a step closer to her and asked seriously again, who are you? Natalia was not stunned, nor did she find his question strange. Instead, she sized him up with a smile. She suddenly took a step closer to him. You're so interesting. Hua Jin pursed his lips. Now, there were only two people in front of him. There was no one else. Hua Jin voiced all the doubts in his heart. You don't seem to be Natalia. Natalia smiled but did not say anything. Oh, why? You're deliberately imitating her. but you can't imitate her temperament. Natalia is very elegant and polite, but she doesn't like to talk. She's afraid of strangers, but she's very careful. You, on the other hand, don't fit in with her at all. Although Hua Jin had only spent a few days with Natalia, he knew that she was too simple-minded. She was as simple as a piece of unpolished jade without any decorations. Simple and easy to understand. So much so that after spending a few days with her, Hua Jin naturally understood her habits and personality characteristics. Moreover, he was a very sensitive person. Therefore, he could easily tell that the person in front of him was not Natalia. I heard that Natalia has two personalities. Hua Jin said seriously, one is called Natalia, but the other one, no one knows until now. So, who are you? Natalia looked at him with a smile and did not answer directly. Instead, she said lightly, Natalia has two personalities. One is called Natalia. She walked softly to the window. She did not look at Hua Jin. Instead, she looked at the fog on the window and looked at the bright moon through the window. The moon was as bright as frost. Pouring into the windowsill, there was an inexplicable sense of coldness. She gently placed her hands on the window and lowered her eyes. The moonlight flowed down along her eyelashes. There was an indescribable elegance, but at the same time, indifference. Natalia doesn't like to talk. She's timid and afraid of strangers, but she draws very well. She likes to sing and listen to other people sing. She has no sense of security, so she trusts others easily and gets hurt easily. After a pause, she used her fingertips to elegantly draw on the window. Her dark red lips actually had a touch of flirtatious beauty. Like a fairy. It also looked like an elf. So, she gradually learned to protect herself and stopped trusting others easily. That's why she doesn't have any friends, but she does have friends. I'm her friend. You're her friend? Hua Jin frowned and asked suspiciously, you. What's your name? Could it be Natalia's other personality? Natalia looked back at him and narrowed her eyes slightly. Hua Jin's tone became gentle. It was not intentional, but he felt that the Natalia in front of him seemed to be a little wary and guarded. He seemed to have interpreted it wrongly and thought that she was insecure. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. Chapter 41:26. She suddenly tiptoed. Even though she was not wearing a dance dress or shoes, the moment she tiptoed, the back of her foot straightened up and she stood up like a swan. She glanced at Hua Jin from the corner of her eye. She twirled her steps slightly and the hem of her dress fluttered like a butterfly's wings. She dances very well. I think she has a talent in this area. Even if she doesn't have a teacher to teach her, she looks very good when she dances. In the dead of the night, she likes to stand on the balcony of the hospital, facing the wind like a swan. Natalia slowly stretched out the tip of her foot and stepped lightly on the floor. It was light, but it was as if the tip of her foot was touching the surface of a river. There were no ripples. Her dance steps were light and graceful. It was so elegant that it was hard to take one's eyes off her. Hua Jin furrowed his eyebrows slightly. He probed, so, you're Nataliza, her second personality? Natalia turned around and looked at him deeply. Suddenly, her lips curled into a smile. There was a hint of contempt in her smile. She asked slowly, who told you that she has dual personality? Hua Jin was stunned. He did not know what she meant by that. Natalia did not have dual personality. Then, the girl in front of him. Was she Natalia or Nataliza? Who are you? The girl smiled. There was a hint of evil in her eyes. I'm not Natalia, and I'm not Nataliza. I'm the emissary. Emissary? Hua Jin was even more confused. Emissary, what was that? His tone was a little heavy. Who are you? I'm in charge of managing this body. The girl lowered her head and looked at her hand. She raised it gently and examined it elegantly. She smiled. I can see them, but they can't see me. I'm the emissary created by Professor Romanka. I'm in charge of maintaining the balance between the personalities. If any of the personalities are disobedient, I have the right to chase them to the land of exile. Hua Jin's eyes revealed a hint of shock. It was not because of what she said, but because of the coldness that flashed in her eyes. It made one's blood run cold. Does the Gongjie know about this? Then, where's Alice? Did she know the truth about Natalia? What did Romanka do to this girl? What emissary? Hua Jin was a little confused. I don't understand what you mean. He wondered if he should call Alice later and ask her what a messenger meant. The girl obviously saw through his thoughts and said, "You want to call Alice?" Hua Jin was a little wary. Did this girl have the ability to read minds? Otherwise, how could she see through his thoughts so easily? He said, "You don't let your imagination run wild. Do you know Alice?" "I know her." The girl's expression suddenly turned cold. "I'm warning you, don't ruin my plan. Do you understand?" "Ruin your plan?" Hua Jin was a little alarmed. "What plan?" "Oh, you want to know so badly?" The girl suddenly walked in front of him with her hands behind her back. Her eyes were as cold as the moonlight. "You shouldn't know so much. Otherwise, it's very dangerous." "Very dangerous. Very dangerous." Chapter 41:27. Hua Jin didn't know why, but he seemed to have sensed too many things from her eyes. He immediately took a step back. Just as he turned around, he heard a strange cry of pain behind him. "Ah! Don't come over." Hua Jin was shocked and hurriedly turned around. He didn't know why the girl was kneeling on the ground, her hands cupping her ears. "Don't come over." Hua Jin was at a loss for what to do when he heard her hysterical screams. "What's wrong?" He immediately went forward and held her shoulders. He was so worried that he didn't know where to go. "What's wrong with you? Why don't you come over? Did you see anything?" She covered her ears tightly, her whole body trembling violently. "Don't talk. Don't talk in my ear. Go away, go away. They're all bad people. Bad people." Hua Jin was scared out of his wits. He didn't know what happened to her body, but he was worried that something was wrong with her. He comforted her gently. I'm here. Don't be afraid. Look at me, look at me." The girl suddenly raised her head. At the same time, almost at the same time, she raised her right hand. Immediately, a pocket watch dangled from her palm. Click, the surroundings suddenly became extremely quiet, leaving only the sound of the pocket watch's hands moving. Click, click, it was clear and rhythmic. Hua Jin subconsciously looked at the pocket watch dangling in front of his eyes. Because of this pocket watch, his vision seemed to be blended together and gradually became blurry. He tried to calm his mind and look away. However, his eyes seemed to be firmly attracted by the pocket watch and there was no room for him to retreat. This pocket watch seemed to have magical powers. However, the little bit of consciousness he had left seemed to remind him. This seemed to be hypnotism. He originally thought that this kind of hypnotism seemed to only be seen in movies and novels. He didn't expect that this kind of hypnotism actually existed in reality. "What's your name?" the girl asked. Hua Jin said numbly, "Rong Jin." "What's my name?" "Messenger." "Wrong." The girl's voice became softer and softer, like a feather. "My name is Natalia. There is no emissary, nor is there a Natalia. Soon, I will snap my fingers. After hearing this sound, you will forget everything you heard, everything you should have heard, and everything you shouldn't have heard. You just had a very long dream. When you wake up from the dream, everything will return to reality. What I said will no longer exist." Hua Jin's eyes gradually became hollow. In his eyes, the constantly swinging pocket watch was reflected. The girl looked at his expression and suddenly put away her pocket watch. She reached out and snapped her fingers. Patter. Hua Jin's eyelids suddenly drooped powerlessly. His entire body suddenly lost its support, and he softly fainted on the ground, unconscious. The girl squatted beside him and looked at him quietly. After waiting for a long time, she hugged his shoulders and dragged him to the sofa with great effort. She helped him onto the sofa. She took a deep breath, then suddenly stood up and walked downstairs. Downstairs, the nanny was cleaning. "Auntie," she called out softly. The nanny's attention was attracted. She looked up and saw that it was her. She asked curiously, "Young miss, is there anything?" Chapter 41:28. Aya, how could this be? The nanny immediately put down her work and hurried upstairs. When she saw Hua Jin lying on the sofa, looking like he had fallen asleep, she couldn't help but sigh. You must be exhausted. How did you fall asleep on the sofa? The nanny nagged as she walked forward and gently pushed Hua Jin's shoulder. Young master, young master. Hua Jin didn't move at all. The nanny was suspicious and shook him a little harder. Hua Jin woke up abruptly. He opened his eyes and felt a terrible headache. His brain felt empty, and he didn't realize where he was. Natalia saw the confusion in his eyes and realized that her hypnosis had worked. She sighed in relief. Hypnosis was all about coordination. If a person was extremely resistant and repulsed before being hypnotized, especially when he was so alert just now, as if he had guessed what she was going to do, the hypnosis could easily fail. She didn't expect it to work. She took a deep breath and immediately smiled. She pretended to be careful and said, "Uncle, are you tired? How did you fall asleep on the sofa?" Hua Jin's gaze was a little confused. He also didn't know why he was lying on the sofa for no reason. His memory was still stuck at the time when Gong Jie left. How did he end up lying here in the blink of an eye? What had happened in between that he didn't realize at all? Hua Jin was a little confused. Why am I here? You said you were tired and wanted to sit for a while. You didn't expect to fall asleep on the sofa. Natalia paused and explained, I didn't want to wake you up, but the weather is getting colder. I was worried that you would catch a cold, so I wanted to wake you up and go back to your room to sleep. Hua Jin was still a little confused when he heard this. Then why did he lose a part of his memory for no reason? What had happened between them? How could he have forgotten all about it? Maybe you're sleepy and tired, Natalia said. If you're tired, go back to your room and sleep. It's getting late. Go to bed early. As she spoke, she yawned. I feel sleepy too. I'm going back to my room to rest. Good night. Hua Jin nodded, but he was still in a daze. His head felt empty. He didn't like this feeling. It was as if he had lost his memory. At that moment, he seemed to understand why Yo-Yo had once told him that the memories of the two personalities were always blank and how painful it was. It was as if he had lost his memory. Hua Jin gently hit his head and racked his brain for a while, but he couldn't remember what had happened. So, he stood up and grabbed his coat. The nanny saw that something was wrong with his expression and asked worriedly, What's wrong? I don't feel well. Hua Jin said weakly, I'm tired. I want to rest early. All right. Then young master, rest early. Good night. And Hua Jin walked towards the bedroom. The nanny looked at his back view hesitantly. Just now, she stood at the top of the stairs and vaguely heard the sound of something heavy falling to the ground. She wanted to go up and take a look, but she didn't. She didn't know what had happened, but she felt that. Chapter 41-29. Gong Fan had become very strange recently. He couldn't put his finger on it, but one day, the time he slept became longer and longer, and the time he was awake became less and less. It was as if he was on the verge of disappearing. Yo-Yo found it very strange. He didn't deliberately suppress him. However, the time Gong Fan woke up became more and more unpredictable. Yo-Yo didn't know what happened to make him like this. Gong Fan hasn't been online for a long time. Lying on his stomach on the bed, little Chen rested his head on his hands and complained to Yu. So much so that no one plays games with me. Xiao Chen had been obsessed with a game recently. It was an FPS shooting game. Yo-Yo couldn't remember the name of the game, but the background of the game seemed to be on a deserted island. There were a total of 100 players who jumped onto the island in the form of parachutes. There were all kinds of vehicles, guns, and explosives on the island. The player who survived to the end would obtain supreme glory. Gong Jie was the first to play this game. Later, Xiao Chen followed suit and started to play with Gong Jie. In the end, Gong Jie thought that he was a scammer. Xiao Chen's marksmanship was top-notch in real life, but in the game, he was a scammer. This game wasn't a game that could be played well simply by having good marksmanship. The most important thing was to have dynamic vision, insight, and even hearing. The opponent could be hiding in the corner, on the roof, or behind the sofa. The one who discovered the enemy first had a chance of winning. Gong Jie didn't want to play with Xiao Chen, so he made an excuse and said that he only wanted to play with 4 people. If Xiao Ichen could gather 4 people, he would play with Xiao Ichen. Xiao Ichen coaxed and pestered Mu Yaja to play with Gong Fan. Gong Fan didn't play much. Gong Jie couldn't go online to play all the time because of work. Thus, when Gong Fan was around, Xiao Ichen would play with him. When Gong Fan wasn't around, he would pester Mu Yaja to play with him. Gong Fan was surprisingly good at this game. Most importantly, he was patient and had a steady state of mind. In a calm state, he could hunt his opponents gracefully and calmly. Xiao Ichen loved playing with him. Gong Fan's insight was extremely shocking. Once he discovered an enemy, he would also report the exact location to Xiao Ichen. Therefore, as long as Gong Jie was around, Xiao Ichen would abandon Mu Yaja and Gong Jie without hesitation and hug his younger brother's thigh tightly. However, Gong Fan had not been online for a while, so Xiao Ichen muttered. Not being able to play the game was a small matter, but Xiao Ichen was vaguely worried that something had happened to Gong Fan. Yo-Yo saw Xiao Ichen lying on the bed in boredom. He was staring at the screen of his phone with his mouth behind his back. On the screen was a picture of the battle results. He had just lost the game and was feeling depressed. His mentality was a little explosive. Yo-Yo was speechless. I see that you've been addicted to playing games recently. Mommy said that if you continue to be so addicted, she'll consider cutting off your internet connection. It's impossible to cut off my internet connection unless he cuts off the internet connection for the whole family. It's impossible to cut off the internet connection, but it's not impossible to confiscate your phone. Xiao Ichen glanced at him and opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. Yo-Yo saw that he obviously had something to ask and snorted. You seem to have something to say. Chapter 41:30. He lay on his stomach on the bed and propped his head up with his hands. I haven't seen Gong Fan for a long time. Is he sick? If he's sick, I'll be sick too. Then, Xiao Ichen couldn't think of any other reason. He sighed and said, I'm just a little worried. Are you really worried? Or are you bored because there's no one to play games with? Xiao Ichen looked aggrieved when he heard this. Am I that kind of person? I'm really worried, okay? You're my younger brother, and he's also my biological younger brother. Isn't it natural for an older brother to be worried about his younger brother? I thought you didn't want to see him since you were so afraid of him. Xiao Ichen smiled guiltily. Actually, it's not that bad. At first, I wasn't used to his personality. I felt that he was too cold. However, after interacting with him for a while, I felt that he was just cold on the outside. To be precise, he was just using his coldness to protect himself from getting hurt. I feel that he must be someone who lacks a sense of security. That's why he doesn't want anyone to walk into his heart so easily. Yo-Yo rubbed his head and said, All right, don't let your imagination run wild. Play your game. Xiao Ichen rested his head on his chest and looked at him innocently with his big, watery eyes. Are you playing? Yo-Yo glanced at him coldly. To put it bluntly, you want me to play games with you. Xiao Ichen blinked his eyes in a flattering manner. Let's play together. This game is really fun. Even Gong Fan is a little addicted to it. Daddy has been playing it whenever he's free. What game? Chicken. Chicken. Yo-Yo thought that he had heard wrongly. What do you want to eat? Chicken. Yo-Yo thought for a moment. He couldn't help but imagine a scene in his mind. On a patch of green grass, a large minion was eating a chicken. It sounded like a childish game. It sounds so boring. Actually, Chicken Dinner is just a nickname. The real name of this game is PlayerUnknown's Battleground. PUBG? Yes. It's just fun. I have an account. I'll lend it to you. Yo-Yo muttered, I don't know how to play this game. If you don't know, I can teach you first. It's very simple and easy to learn. It's just that it's a little difficult to get first place. Anyway, once you start playing, don't think about getting chicken dinner. Just think about how to familiarize yourself with the controls. Without hesitation, Xiao Ichen dragged Yo-Yo into his study room and pushed him in front of the computer. Yo-Yo and Xiao Ichen each had a different study room. Originally, there were only 2 study rooms. One was for Mu Yaja's personal use and the other was for Yo-Yo and Xiao Ichen to share. In fact, it was not a problem for the two of them to share a study room. Yo-Yo used the study room more. Xiao Ichen did not use the study room much other than doing his homework. Later on, Xiao Ichen started playing games. Hence, he asked for a study room of his own. Coincidentally, there was an empty room on the second floor. After some decorations, it became his personal study room. Compared to Yo-Yo's study room, Xiao Ichen's study room was renovated later on. Hence, it was full of technological vibes. It was all intelligent systems. Intelligent curtains, intelligent doors and windows, intelligent stereo, intelligent bookshelves. Chapter 41-31. As soon as Xiao Ichen opened the door, he instructed the artificial intelligence, "Close the curtains." After a second of reaction, the curtains slowly closed by themselves. "Turn on the lights." The lights turned on with a pop sound. Then, Yo-Yo saw 3 supercomputers. They were called supercomputers because these 3 computers were equipped with gaming equipment such as keyboards, mice, speakers, and earbuds. They were all the best equipment available on the market. It was said that Xiao Ichen had taken this study out of his New Year's money account. It was also said that Xiao Ichen's New Year's money account was at least a 9-figure sum. These pieces of equipment were nothing to him. Yo-Yo sat down on the computer chair curiously. This computer chair had a massage function. At the same time, it was built according to ergonomic standards to prevent cervical and lumbar spine problems caused by prolonged gaming. Sitting on it, he felt that his whole body was surrounded. It was indeed very comfortable. Yo-Yo frowned. "Where's the display?" "Wait a minute." Xiao Ichen pressed a button. After a while, the display shelf slowly lowered from above his head. There were a total of 3 displays on the shelf. The one in the middle was a curved screen. For the sake of playing a game, little Ichen would use the best configuration no matter what. Xiao Ichen helped him log into the game account. Yo-Yo was confused throughout. This is the European server. It's a European server. However, there are still many players in China. Xiao Ichen explained the rules of the game to him. "Do you know about mercenaries?" "Yes." "There are 100 players participating in each game. The players' characters are mercenaries. They parachute to every corner of the island and look for weapons, vehicles, and supplies with their bare hands. They also fight in various terrains. To win, strategy and marksmanship are equally important. In each game, the safe zone will be changed randomly. The weapons and items obtained in each zone will appear randomly. If you can survive until the end, you will win. In other words, the other 99 players are losers," said the boy in a low voice. "You could say that. Then why is this game called Chicken Dinner? Winner winner chicken dinner, have you heard of it?" "Yes, I have. That's a saying from a Las Vegas casino. A long time ago, every LAS the casinos in Vegas had a rice dish that consisted of 3 pieces of chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. The standard reward for winning a bet was, so if you won once, you would have enough money to buy a chicken rice dish. If you get first place in this game, that's what you'll get. In other words, you'll get chicken dinner tonight. That's how the nickname came about." "Oh." However, not every player can be so lucky to get chicken dinner. Yo-Yo asked, "Is Gong Fan very good at this game?" "Super awesome." Xiao Ichen had a look of disbelief on his face. "Every time I get a chicken dinner, it's because he brought me to play. I remember that when he played games, his marksmanship was not as good as yours." Chapter 41-32. As Yo-Yo listened, he recalled the words that Gong Fan left in his notebook. "I don't want to play games with Xiao Ichen anymore. He's always dragging me down. How can he be so stupid? Moreover, this game is so boring. It's a waste of time." Yo-Yo wondered what Xiao Ichen would do if he knew what Gong Fan said about him. "Don't you think that you're playing very badly?" Xiao Ichen blushed. He did not look at him directly. Instead, he walked to the side awkwardly and said softly, "I think my skills are okay. This game is not easy to begin with. It's already not easy for me to play it like this. If it's a solo match, I can make it to the final circle. Wow, is this something worth bragging about?" Yo-Yo was curious. What was so charming about this game that even his picky brother had fallen for it? He heard that his uncle and daddy had fallen for the game as well. He logged into the game and was matched with an opponent. The next second, the screen was loaded into the spawn area. Yo-Yo realized that his character was a girl. He was wearing a white shirt and a skirt with a pair of sunglasses. It reminded him of how Lisa would look like when she grew up. The spawn area was noisy. As the microphone was connected to the public channel, it was extremely noisy. Yo-Yo found the switch to turn off the microphone. Suddenly, a voice entered his ears. "Are you a big sister?" Yo-Yo was shocked. When he came to his senses, he realized that a man with a rough appearance and a soft voice was standing in front of him. It was as if he could see the man's curious gaze through the screen. Just as Yo-Yo was about to turn off the voice chat, Xiao Chen covered his earpiece and spoke into the microphone with a coquettish voice. "Big brother, how old are you?" Wow, the man immediately looked at Xiao Chen's avatar. Yu turned his view as well, only to see that little Chen had also created a female avatar. He despised him in his heart. "You're a guy. Why are all your avatars female?" Xiao Chen covered the microphone and complained, "Because the men in this game are all unshaven. They're so ugly and rough." Then, he spoke into the microphone. "Big brother, can you take me to chicken dinner?" Yo-Yo's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Little Chen had yet to change his voice. Before that, his voice was no different from a girl's. Then, through the microphone's rendering, the male player on the other side quickly believed her. "Wow, it's really a girl." His teammate ran over from the side and reminded him, "Don't be fooled. There are a lot of players pretending to be girls these days. Do they have voice-changing software?" Little Chen immediately said in a coquettish tone, "I'm not pretending. Only an idiot would believe it. How could a woman claim to be a girl?" Yo-Yo thought that no one would believe Xiao Chen's words. However, he had obviously overestimated the IQ of this nerd in the game. "You sound like a girl. You sound like a soft girl. Girl, your voice is so nice. What's your name?" Xiao Chen held back his laughter and smiled. "Yu Yao." "Phut." Yo-Yo could not hold it in and almost spat it out. Chapter 41:33. Little Chen was simply out of his mind. Even his own sister was being cheated by him. Yo-Yo was speechless. If Yu Yao finds out that you've tricked her like this, she'll definitely draw circles and curse you. You said it yourself. How could a sister bear to draw circles and curse her own brother? The game had begun. On the plane, the two men were still chatting with Xiao Chen. It was obvious that they believed that Xiao Chen was really a girl. Along the way, they kept beating around the bush. "Miss, how old are you this year?" "I'm 18. Do you have a boyfriend?" "Why would an 18-year-old have a boyfriend?" "I'm so addicted to gaming that I'm not in the mood to date." Yo-Yo was expressionless the entire time. All she could do was listen to Xiao Chen's nonsense. "Miss, where do you want to jump to later?" "The military base. There's a lot of people at the military base." "Miss, you have to protect me." Xiao Chen grinned. "Sure. Give me the guns you picked up and I'll protect you." "Okay. That's great. Miss, you're going to carry us." The game was a two-player team. The two men were in the same team. However, Yo-Yo could tell that the two men were obviously trying to flirt with Xiao Chen the entire time. She could also tell that they were very confident in their gaming skills. "Miss, if you win this round, why don't we add each other as friends?" Xiao Chen smiled. "Sure. Oh, right. Who's your other teammate?" Xiao Chen glanced at Yo-Yo and explained, "She's my sister." "Sister?" "Yes, her name is Lisa." "What's her English name?" "It's very Western." Xiao Chen winked at Yo-Yo. "Sister, say something." Yo-Yo ignored him. The two men coaxed her. Miss Lisa, say something." Yo-Yo forced out a few words. "I don't feel like talking." Xiao Chen explained, "It's her first time playing. I pestered her to team up with me. Otherwise, it's too boring to play alone." Yo-Yo rolled her eyes again. Xiao Chen was good at bullshitting. Didn't he blush when he said that? Xiao Ichen marked the military base and teach Yo-Yo how to parachute jump. When they were near the base, Xiao Ichen said, "Jump." The four of them jumped. Yo-Yo did it. Yo Ichen escot Yo-Yo Ichen he Yo-Os he was in their s. Once they landed, they had to search for equipment. By searching for equipment, they were searching for guns. There were a lot of people in the military base. It could be said that it was a sea of people. Many people chose to stay in the military base. The game's effects were very realistic. After Yo-Yo landed, she immediately followed Xiao Ichen into a room. When they entered the room and their characters stopped moving, they could hear many footsteps passing by outside the window. Little Ichen's expression tensed up instantly. "I think there are footsteps. Someone's here. Someone's here?" Xiao Ichen shushed her and listened carefully. He immediately turned the camera to the window and said to Yo-Yo, "I'll keep watch. You go and search the room for guns." Okay. Chapter 41-34. It looked like a box with bottles and jars inside. The words first aid kit were written on it. However, he did not know what this item was used for. Just as Yo-Yo was about to ask, Xiao Ichen asked curiously, "Did you pick something up?" "Yes, I picked it up." "What is it?" "First aid kit." "Medicine." Little Ichen immediately leaned over to take a look in disbelief. His eyes widened. "Are you that lucky?" In this game, other than first aid kits, painkillers, energy drinks, and epinephrine from the airdrop, there was also a first aid kit. This item could instantly replenish one's health points. The other items could only be replenished bit by bit. Even a first aid kit could only replenish 70% of one's health points. However, first aid kits were very rare. It could be said that they were very hard to come by. "Are you that lucky? Am I that lucky? Maybe it's because of the newbie halo." Xiao Ichen continued, "There are still a few rooms and a few floors above. You can search them all. This house is quite big, maybe there are other treasures." Okay. Thus, the boy began to search for them in an orderly manner. Every time he picked up an item, Yo-Yo would read it out loud. However, the more he read, the more Xiao Ichen wondered if Yo-Yo's luck was off the charts. Special Forces helmet, military bulletproof vest, 8x scope, 98K sniper rifle, M16 or something. I think it's an automatic rifle. It uses 5.56 bullets. The more Xiao Ichen listened, the more his eyes widened. There's also a huge backpack. This is too much. How can I be that lucky? Forget about the level 3 backpack, level 3 helmet, level 3 military vest, and the 98K. However, the 8x scope and the first aid kit were good items that he could not find even if he searched for them. Amazing. Outside the house, there was a fierce exchange of gunfire. If he went out, he would become a live target. Therefore, Xiao Ichen decided to stay in the house. Seeing that no one was coming in, Xiao Ichen went upstairs and asked Yo-Yo to give him some guns. Yo-Yo was still not very familiar with the operation. Fortunately, there was no one around, so Xiao Ichen taught him bit by bit. Although he was not familiar with the operation, he was very familiar with the computer, so he quickly familiarized himself with the operation. Xiao Ichen had never held such a good starting weapon before. With his 98K in hand, he crouched on the rooftop and aimed outside the window. Fortunately, they were in the safe zone. Through the 8x scope, Xiao Ichen saw people fighting and exchanging fire in another area. He realized that the two most ferocious fighters were the two men who had hit on him on the plane. It wasn't far from him. The gunfire soon stopped. Xiao Ichen saw that the two men were looting the bags, so he asked Yo-Yo to follow him and ran towards the two men. When he got closer, he hid behind a bunker and asked, "Little brother, did you pick up a good gun?" "Little sister, you're not dead." "That's great." The two men returned with a full load and threw a pile of good equipment in front of him. "Snatch it, a 4x scope, 8 first aid kits, and a lot of ammo. I'll give it all to you." "Wow. Are you really giving it all to me?" Xiao Ichen pretended to be overjoyed, and his voice became even more coquettish. Yo-Yo shuddered when he heard this. How mushy. Chapter 41-35. However, it was obvious that these two young men obviously fell for this trick. "Miss, your voice is so gentle. Miss, Come with us. We'll take you to chicken dinner. Let's play together in the next round. Xiao Chen said sweetly, sure. As he spoke, he winked at Yo-Yo smugly. The smugness on his face was obvious. Yo-Yo twitched his lips and said coldly, I want a first aid kit too. Wow, although Yo-Yo's voice was cold, it sounded like a young girl's voice. Moreover, he spoke softly. Through the earpiece, it sounded like a lowly's voice. A man walked over and whispered, just now. I found a first aid kit. Here. Take it. As he spoke, the man threw a first aid kit in front of Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo picked it up with a clear conscience. Xiao Chen did not know whether to laugh or cry. The four of them formed a temporary team. They found a car and drove to another city. At first, Yo-Yo felt that it was a little boring. However, he gradually realized that there was something fun about this game. The fact that so many people were playing this game proved that it had a certain charm to it. For example, this game did not have the messy marksmanship of other FPS games. It only had attentiveness, eyesight, and hearing. Being observant and alert was the only way for this game to last until the end. According to Xiao Chen, if Gong Fan played this game, he would have an 8x scope. Yo-Yo did not understand what he meant by an 8x scope. Little Chen said that as long as Gong Fan was staring at the screen, even if it was a figure smaller than a sesame seed on a distant mountain peak, he could see it. Without any background, he could simply use a rifle to blast that person's head off. There were a few times when people suspected that he was cheating and reported him. However, after the official investigation, there were still some people who were unconvinced that there was no cheating involved. Once, he was matched with a professional player who specialized in doing live broadcasts of this game. When he was a streamer, he was shot in the head by Gong Fan. When he watched the replay and saw that Gong Fan did not have a scope, he naturally thought that he had used X-ray vision and auto-aim. As a result, there was a huge commotion. However, in the end, the officials checked and found that Gong Fan did not use a plug-in. They also analyzed the aiming trajectory and thought that it was a visual recognition and a holographic sight. The streamer was slapped in the face and had nothing to say. His popularity dropped immediately. After all, slandering other players for cheating was a shameful thing in the gaming world. There were many cheats in this game. However, there weren't many players like Gong Fan who played as if they were dead. Little Chen was also surprised that Gong Fan knew how to control the gun with some tricks to reduce the recoil of the gun when it was fired. He did not expect that Gong Fan, who had not been in contact with games, would be so good at such games. He also sighed. Why was it that even though they were born in the same mother's womb, his judgment was not as good as Gong Fan's? Gong Jie said that Gong Fan's dynamic vision was very good. There was once when they were playing table tennis. The ball was so fast, but he could actually see the trajectory of the table tennis ball clearly and even make predictions in advance. Gong Jie said that if Gong Fan were to play tennis, he would definitely be very good. Xiao Chen was envious. Chapter 41-36. As the game progressed to the middle stage, the number of survivors on the map dropped to 29. In other words, other than the four of them, there were 25 players left. As Yo-Yo was not familiar with the game, he did not need to go out and kill people. It could be said that he was enjoying the fruits of someone else's labor. The other two young men and Xiao Chen went around killing people. The three of them had a huge advantage in this two-player competition. Yo-Yo was in charge of searching house by house under their cover. Gradually, the four of them became very well equipped. Each of them had at least 10 first aid kits. Even the level 3 backpack was full of bullets. Xiao Chen asked Yo-Yo to keep 60 bullets for himself and give the rest to him. As for his backpack, he only needed to keep the first aid kit. In the final circle, the real battle was between grenades and first aid kits. Only by staying low could they get chicken dinner. However, what surprised Xiao Chen was that not only was Yo-Yo lucky, but he also had the Destiny Circle. As the name suggested, the Destiny Circle was a safe zone and a blue circle that would appear in the game. It was not called a blue circle but an electric field. Standing in the circle would cause one's health to decrease. Only by entering the safe zone would one be able to avoid such damage. The safe zone would slowly shrink. In other words, The players would be forced to damage each other until the final winner was decided. Yo-Yo's face was extremely pale. He looked very lucky. Almost every time the safe zone refreshed, it would be under his feet. He had the newbie halo, but this halo was too scary. Xiao Chen did not believe it. He asked Yo-Yo to stand there and not move. Yo-Yo hid beside the cabinet and lay there without moving. The safe zone refreshed twice, but it was still under his feet. The blue circle was getting smaller and smaller. There were not many players left in the game. There were only about 10 of them left. Xiao Chen was determined to stay low. Yo-Yo squatted in the corner. Outside the door, the two little brothers acted as her escorts, guarding the window and making tut-tut-tut sounds non-stop. In the end, there were only 4 people left. Xiao Chen looked at Yo-Yo, and Yo-Yo looked at Xiao Chen. Clearly, they did not understand what he meant. Only 4 people left. Xiao Chen whispered, "Should we get rid of those 2 boys so that we can get the chicken dinner?" Yo-Yo's lips twitched. "I don't think that's a good idea. After all, they have protected us all the way. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have been able to fight so smoothly. Are you trying to burn the bridge after crossing the river?" Xiao Chen felt a little guilty when he heard that. Originally, he was also a little guilty. After all, these 2 little brothers were sincerely good to him. He couldn't bear to stab such kind-hearted little brothers in the back. Not long after, the 2 little brothers also came upstairs. "Miss, there's no one else. It's just the 4 of us. We promised to get the chicken dinner. Why don't we jump into the blue circle and let you guys get the chicken dinner? What do you think?" The little brothers obviously had the spirit of self-sacrifice. They had protected Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo all the way. In the end, they actually wanted to sacrifice themselves so that Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo could get the chicken dinner. Xiao Chen felt even more guilty. "No need. You guys don't have to jump into the blue circle." Chapter 41:37. However, the 2 young men said in the public chat, "We promised to bring you guys to win chicken dinner. Miss, I think you're pretty good. Why don't we add each other as friends after the game ends and we can win chicken dinner together? What do you think?" Most men would be happy to meet a female player in a game like this. Most of the male players were heroes and wanted to be their bodyguards. This was a mysterious sense of mission. To them, bringing a girl to win chicken dinner was much more fulfilling than winning chicken dinner by themselves. Xiao Chen looked at Yo-Yo and hesitated. Should he tell them the truth? They would be disappointed and aggrieved, right? However, just like what Yo-Yo had said, there had to be a winner at the end of the game anyway. At most, he would reveal his identity and see what their decision would be. Hence, Xiao Chen mustered up his courage and said, "Actually, we're not girls." There was a long silence. It was so silent that Xiao Chen thought the computer had crashed. The local server of this game had not been released yet. The server was not very stable and would often go crazy. Xiao Chen thought that the server had gone crazy. However, a speechless voice came from the other side. "What? You're not girls? Didn't you say that you're girls?" Xiao Chen then realized that it was not because the server was lagging but because the 2 young men could not accept reality and were silent. Yo-Yo covered his face and felt a little embarrassed. Pretending to be a girl to play games was too cowardly. There was almost no good gaming experience and no sense of mission to survive until the end. He only felt that he had to lie down all the way. Xiao Chen explained awkwardly, "Actually, we're all boys. You use voice changers." The boy's voice suddenly became angry. There was a type of software called a voice changer. When the software was turned on, the voice changer could be used to imitate other characters' voices. Some male players cheated and bought voice changers. Then, they pretended to be girls and won chicken dinner. Players called these people ladyboys. Xiao Chen quickly explained, "It's not a voice changer. We're only 11, and we haven't started to change our voices yet. So..." Before he could finish his sentence, he heard a flurry of footsteps. Then, the 2 male players rushed in front of them with guns in their hands. All he heard was an angry shout, "Liar!" Then, Xiao Chen felt a burst of electric sparks on the screen. Tut tut tut, 2 male players were shooting at them with their AKMs. Soon, An interface popped up on the screen. Keep up the good work and get the chicken dinner next time. The team was ranked second. Xiao Chen was stunned and did not react for a long time. The two young men turned hostile. When they heard Xiao Chen confess that he was a boy, they shot him and Yo-Yo to death. This, Xiao Chen was completely dumbfounded. He had thought of countless endings, but he never thought that it would be such an ending. Hey, how could it be like this? Just because he lied to them that he was a girl, they turned their backs on him? They had killed 100 players all the way to the final circle. Shouldn't they have some revolutionary feelings? They were even comrades. Yo-Yo looked at Xiao Chen's embarrassed expression and could not help but laugh out loud. Chapter 41:38. Yo-Yo laughed mercilessly, completely ignoring Xiao Chen's embarrassment. You're laughing. You're still laughing? You still have the nerve to laugh. We almost got chicken dinner. What do you mean by we? Yo-Yo held back her laughter and said seriously, from the beginning to the end of the game, I don't think we contributed much. What do you mean we didn't contribute much? We cheered them on and even helped them search for first aid kit. Didn't you give them all 3 first aid kits? I felt guilty and knew that I shouldn't have lied to them that I was a girl, so I came clean. They didn't have to be so heartless. They even turned their backs on us and shot us to death. Yo-Yo couldn't hold it in anymore. If Yuyaro grows up and finds out that you used her name to cheat others, let's see how she'll deal with you. When Xiao Chen heard this, he didn't think much of it. That'll happen when she's older. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard outside the door. Brother, speak of the devil. Yo-Yo left the computer table and walked to the door. He saw Yuyaro standing outside the door in a little dress. She looked up at Yo-Yo with a smile. It's time to eat. Mommy told me to call you guys. Yuyao, good girl. Yo-Yo picked Yuyaro up and hugged her like a glutinous rice ball. He couldn't bear to let her go. Yuyaro was already more than 3 years old. Gradually, her facial features became more and more mature. The amazing thing was that Yuyaro and Muyaja didn't look much different from each other. Perhaps it was because their daddy's genes were too strong. Old people always said that boys usually looked more like their mothers, while girls looked more like their fathers. However, Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen, this pair of twins, looked more like Muyaja. She had thought that when Yuyaro grew up, she would be more like Yunshusha. When she was young, she looked very similar to Yunshusha. However, as he grew bigger and bigger, other than his eyes and skin, the rest of his body started to resemble Muyaja. Yueyao's skin was very white, even whiter than Yunshusha's. It was not an exaggeration to describe her as milky white. She had the rare snow-white skin of Asians. Her curled eyelashes were also occupied by him. At first glance, she looked like a doll. Yunshusha especially loved to dress her up. Dresses, princess outfits, she was so happy to dress her up. Every girl had a dream of being a princess. Even after they grew up, this dream remained. However, some people were lucky enough to keep this dream alive, such as her. She poured all her dreams of being a princess onto Yuyao. From the princess room to the princess dress, Yunshusha couldn't wait to pamper Yuyao. However, she was still the most strict with Yuyao. After all, if she wasn't strict, Yuyao could be said to be omnipotent at home. Too many people doted on her. Muyaja, Gongjie, Hua Jin, Yo-Yo, and Xiao Chen. No one could bear to not dote on her. Especially Muyaja. He was a slave to his daughter. His servile nature was simply unseen. He could never bear to lose his temper at Yuyao. The most memorable day was that day when Muyaja woke up in the morning and prepared to go to work. He stood in front of the mirror and combed his hair. Usually, he didn't allow others to touch a single strand of his hair. Even Yunshusha had limited privileges. Chapter 41:39. Every morning before he went to the office, he would meticulously fix his hair and style it with mousse. Yuyaro suddenly woke up and opened her mouth to ask for daddy. He walked over and picked her up. His hair was not fixed yet, but the little princess already thought that his hair looked good. She grabbed it with her little hands. Muyaja did not allow it and patted her little hands. As a result, her rebellious heart was aroused. The more her daddy did not allow her to touch it, the more she wanted to touch it. Her little hands scratched wildly, messing up his hair. Yun Shusha walked over and saw Muyaja carrying Yuyao. She looked helpless, but she could not bear to scold him. That day, a certain someone went to work with this messy hair. It was said that Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun had been secretly laughing at him behind his back. It was unprecedented for their boss to appear in the office with a head of messy hair. However, his hair had already been fixed. Unless it was washed, it really could not be fixed. When asked for the reason, Muyaja was even proud of his little princess's masterpiece and said that Yuyao had personally done it for him. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun were amused when they heard that. They laughed at him for being a clown. Muyaja said half-jokingly, "Who asked me to only have one daughter? If we have another one, it won't be just one." Jiang Shun also joked. Lu Jinyu bumped his shoulder. "Are you stupid? Boss only has one daughter. There won't be any more in the future. What's wrong? Have you forgotten?" Lu Jinyu was speechless. Boss had a sterilization operation. "Ah, I remember now." Jiang Shun only then remembered that after Yuyao was born, Muyaja had a sterilization operation. A son and a daughter. It could be said to be perfect. He had nothing to be regretful about. Yo-Yo hugged Yuyao and teased her while saying meaningfully, "Yuyao, in the future, don't play with that brother of yours. He even cheated his biological sister. Let's ignore him." With that, Yo-Yo carried Yuyao away. In the room, Xiaochen was dumbfounded as he watched Yo-Yo leave with Yuyao in her arms. "When did I?" he muttered and chased after her. Yo-Yo enjoyed spending time with Yuyao. Yuyao liked to pester him to play games. However, he was only 3 years old after all. The games he played were naturally the most childish of all. Yo-Yo had long passed the age of playfulness. He matured much earlier than other children, so he was not interested in most of the games that Yuyao liked to play. But as long as it was something Yuyao liked to play, he was willing to be patient and play with him wholeheartedly. Yuyao likes to play with dolls. For this reason, Muyaja specially decorated a room for dolls. The room was very small, but all the wardrobes and furnishings were custom-made according to Yueyao's height. The wardrobes were filled with dolls' clothes and toys for playing house. Yuyao likes to dress the dolls. Every time she pulled Yo-Yo into the room, she liked to change the clothes for each of the dolls. At this time, Yo-Yo would style the doll's hair according to the clothes that Yuyao changed. The siblings would also study how to braid the hair. Yo-Yo thought to himself, "Let's just treat it as practice for the dolls." When Yuyao grew up, the hair braiding technique that he had practiced would come in handy. Hence, sometimes, Yo-Yo played even more seriously than Yuyao. Chapter 4140. If it were Gong Fan, he wouldn't be that interested in dolls. However, if Yuyao pestered him to play with her, he would be very willing. For some reason, if Yuyao pestered and pestered them, no matter which family member it was, they would feel a great sense of accomplishment. Making Yuyao like them was a great source of pride. He remembered that once, Yuyao pestered Gong Jie and asked him to hug her. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Gong Jie bragged about it for half a year. "Yuyao likes it and wants me to hug her. My niece is especially clingy to me." It seemed that this gave him a great sense of accomplishment. Because of this, Muyaja muttered in his heart. That day, it was just that he wasn't around. If he had been around, Gong Jie wouldn't have had the chance to appear. However, Gong Jie felt indignant. He felt that as an uncle, his charm was not inferior to Muyaja's at all. One was a father, the other was an uncle. They were at loggerheads. Gong Fan liked Yuyao very much. Perhaps this kind of affection was second only to the kind of affection he had for Yun Shusha. When he was with Yuyao, even if the little girl was noisy, his heart would feel very peaceful and beautiful. The most beautiful thing in the world was when she was noisy and he was laughing. When Xiaochen came to the living room, he saw Yuyao sitting in Yo-Yo's arms, holding a pizza and eating it with relish. This pizza was made by Yun Shusha. Recently, she wasn't very busy, so she started to learn how to bake. Not to mention, she really didn't have any talent at all. Thus, after asking many friends for help, she finally managed to buy a few baking recipes. She also spent a lot of money to buy a super expensive smart oven. It was the kind of oven that even idiots wouldn't burn. In the recipe books, no matter what ingredient it would be labeled with the amount, the number of grams, and so on. Yoon Shusha strictly followed the recipe books and learned to cook step by step. She even used test tubes to control the amount of sugar. With the help of other tools, she finally made a few finished products. This plate of pizza was her successful product. Although it wasn't as delicious as Yo-Yos, it was comparable to the pizza in the restaurant. Yuyaro was a picky eater, just like Muyaja, but she could not bear to part with this pizza. Yoon Shusha felt a great sense of accomplishment. "Where's Daddy?" Little Ichen sat down in his seat and looked around. "Why isn't Daddy back yet? He has to work overtime today for a meeting, so let's eat first and not wait for him. And he's not coming to eat. Probably has a dinner appointment." Muyaja rarely had dinner parties unless it was an important one that he could not refuse. Only then would he not return home for dinner. It must be said that Yoon Shusha's marriage to Muyaja was truly a marriage of love. In the entertainment industry, there were many people who were jealous of her. Most female celebrities who married into rich families looked glamorous on the surface, but in reality, they had to swallow their own bitterness. Everyone was waiting. When Yoon Shusha's scandal was exposed, the reporters from the gossip magazines were also eager to take pictures of Yoon Shusha's unfortunate marriage. Almost every time there was any news, these reporters would be on the move. They remembered one time when a reporter took a picture of Muyaja hugging a woman as he went in and out of a shopping mall. Hence, they spread the news that Muyaja was having an affair and that Yoon Shusha had a love rival. In the end, a fan enlarged the picture and found that the woman in the picture was Yoon Shusha herself. The loving scene between the husband and wife made many people envious. Chapter 41-41. This piece of news also became the biggest joke at that time. Some people laughed at how the paparazzi had resorted to all sorts of underhanded means to smear Yoon Shusha and Muyaja's marriage in order to hype up the news. Some people envied Yoon Shusha for marrying for love. There were so many female celebrities in the entertainment industry, but Yoon Shusha was not the only one who had successfully married into a wealthy family. However, there were not many lucky people like Yoon Shusha. In fact, there were none at all. Most female celebrities, especially those in the entertainment industry, dreamed of marrying into a wealthy family. However, all the rich young masters knew in their hearts that celebrities who came from the entertainment industry would not be able to survive in the industry if they did not have some tricks up their sleeves. Hence, they knew very well that celebrities weren't that great. Therefore, most female celebrities who married into wealthy families did not lead happy lives. Even if their husbands were extremely wealthy, it was already extremely difficult for them to maintain their status after marrying into a wealthy family. There was no need to think about how many colorful banners their husbands had outside. Some men would even brazenly bring other women into their homes and have several women serve one husband. As wives, they could only swallow their bitterness. Because the family's finances were controlled by the men. After marriage, many female celebrities retired or were in a semi-retired state. The most pitiful thing was to marry a rich second-generation heir and live a good life. In the end, after 3 years of marriage, they found out that their husband was a fake rich man who was on the verge of bankruptcy. They were ridiculed for nothing. This female celebrity wanted a divorce so that she could make a comeback and start acting again after the divorce. However, her management company warned her that when she announced her retirement, she had said that she had married for love. If news of this divorce got out, the public would laugh at her for marrying into a wealthy family for money. Now that her husband was bankrupt, she wanted a divorce. That was too worldly. Her image was not flattering. Therefore, the public relations company created an image for her. In order to repay her husband's debts, she made a comeback to support her family. In short, the entertainment industry was full of different kinds of people, but most of them did not lead a good life. Therefore, her life was not satisfactory. So many people hoped that Yoon Shusha would not lead a good life. It was as if their mentality could only be balanced if she did not lead a good life. Otherwise, so many people who married into wealthy families were unlucky. Why should she be happy? There were even female celebrities who hired private detectives to secretly spy on Yoon Shusha after she married Mu Yaja. However, the truth was that they saw it clearly. After marriage, Mu Yaja's business. The Shengyu Financial Group had replaced the Mu family's position in the capital and became the #1 wealthy family. However, after marriage, he cared a lot about the family. If it was not too important, he would usually leave it to Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen to follow up. After having a daughter, this high-spirited man seemed to be even more gentle. In the past, whenever he appeared in front of the public, Mu Yaja would be unsmiling and aloof no matter what happened. Of Yoon of Yoon of Yoon of Yoon of Yoon of Mu 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 of Yoon of Yoon of Yoon. He was also willing to appear on camera. Occasionally, the media would muster up the courage to ask about the little princess, and he was willing to share some of his happiness after marriage. Chapter 41-42. Especially when it came to the time when he was a stay-at-home dad, he did everything by himself, from making milk powder to changing diapers. He worked hard to serve this little princess. The reporters did not believe it. What a joke. A man with a net worth of hundreds of millions actually did not hire a nanny and changed diapers himself. Didn't he find it dirty? Mu Yaja retorted matter-of-factly, "She's my own daughter. What's there to dislike?" There was a hint of displeasure in his tone. It was as if that question was blasphemy to his daughter. After getting married, even though Mu Yaja was a newlywed, he was slowly becoming more and more like a veteran. During the day, he hinted that he would go to work and leave work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. During holidays, he would take his wife and children on holiday and even attend parent-teacher meetings personally. The entire entertainment industry was dumbfounded. What kind of person was Mu Yaja? After getting married, if it had been 1 or 2 years, it would have been fine. But after getting married for so long, there were no scandals at all. The only scandals were with his own wife. Wasn't that infuriating? Everyone was waiting to see Yoon Shusha's drama, but in the end, they were slapped in the face. It was infuriating. What was the saying? Comparisons were odious. Why was it that other people's husbands, who were also rich young masters, were so happy and treated each other with respect, while they lived in such an abyss of suffering? It was unfair. Because of this, someone specially hired a water army to smear Yoon Shusha's image. In the end, not long after, Mu Yaja did public relations and banned that female celebrity. He banned her just like that. He did not say many harsh words, but he did it cleanly. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey. With this, no one dared to be rash. It's rare that daddy doesn't come home for dinner. Xiao Chen held a drumstick and asked curiously, "What's the matter?" "I don't know. You know, I don't know much about your daddy's work." Yoon Shusha smiled and asked him, "How is it? Is today's drumstick better than the one you made last time?" Xiao Chen said, Anne, you're not allowed to compare with Yo-Yo." Yoon Shusha quickly interrupted him. Yo-Yo held back her laughter. Xiao Chen thought about it carefully and subconsciously smacked his lips. Oh. Yoon Shusha cleared her throat and said, "You're not allowed to smack your lips while eating." Xiao Chen smiled, revealing his pearly white teeth. "Because mommy cooks well. Is it better than last time?" "Yes. That's good." Yoon Shusha had reached perfection. Anyway, it was fine as long as Xiao Chen liked it. Yo-Yo said, "Mommy's cooking skills are improving." Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen lowered her voice and whispered into his ear, "You don't know how expensive Mommy's cooking books are. Last time, she even secretly wanted to sign up for a cooking class. If even that doesn't taste good, then..." Yoon Shusha's ears were sharp and she heard it. "What did you say?" I said, Xiao Chen immediately said, "I just said that Yo-Yo's cooking skills are so good. He must have inherited Mommy's talent. It's just that Mommy didn't show it in the past." "Is that so?" Yoon Shusha looked at Yo-Yo suspiciously. Xiao Chen also looked at Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo glanced at him and raised her eyebrows. Xiao Chen looked as innocent as a little deer. Xiao Chen just said that if Mommy cooks for him every day, he will be so happy that he won't know what to do. Yoon Shusha was relieved to hear Yo-Yo say this.